Hi, I'm Victoria, a professional photo retoucher and PMU and beauty specialist with years of experience. I help artists and photographers showcase their work at its best through high-end beauty editing, and now I'm excited to share my techniques with you. This class is perfect for PMU artists, beauty professionals, content creators, and beginner photo retouchers who want to improve the look of their beauty photos. Whether you're working with client images or growing your social media, this course will give you a clean, professional retouching workflow, even if you're a complete beginner. In this course, you'll learn a full, step-by-step retouching workflow for beauty and PMU photos. We'll start with the fundamentals: skin cleanup, color correction, frequency separation, dodge and burn, and enhancing eyes, lips, and facial features. Then, we'll move into advanced and creative techniques, including portrait retouching, working with high redness, drawing realistic lashes and brows, adding texture, and creating bold collages, neon, and gradient backgrounds. By the end of this course, you'll be able to retouch beauty and PMU photos professionally for your portfolio, social media, or clients, using clean, non-destructive techniques that preserve skin texture and natural details. Let's get started. Hi everyone. I'm glad to meet you all here on my Photoshop course. I do feel like giving you loads of useful stuff, having so much information which I'm willing to share with you, and I would like everyone who bought this course to take it and on passing it, to find it truly useful so that you all feel satisfied with your successful results this course could eventually help you achieve. I try to collect quite a consistent amount of data and compress it, thus informing you of all I know by using words of utmost clarity. This program is surely to become high valued for you as it's great both for everyday life and work, the latter one performed as a future retoucher or a permanent makeup specialist, doesn't matter. So, let's start with a case when you haven't got Photoshop yet. No worries, 'cause getting one is that easy. All you need is to visit adobe.com website where you first choose the country you're currently located in. Mine is Spain at the moment, so the site says I should purchase a Photoshop with a Spanish license. To do this, I go to the first tab. And the Photoshop is here. I choose the one I need. Here you can try it for free or buy it right away. And, if you click Buy Now or, for example, Try for Free, then there will be a choice of all the tariffs that are worth buying or trying in the future. I advise choosing the lowest rate, under the title Photography, which provides a standard package. In fact, Adobe deals with a large number of programs for both retouching and editing videos, photos, graphic designs. However, since we have a Photoshop course, I can assure you that opting for the Photoshop Simplified pack with standard sets will be the best choice to make, for it goes by the most reasonable price. So now that this is out of the way, I suggest moving on to learning Photoshop. I open the program itself. This field here will be empty in your case. In mine it's not, 'cause I already have photos here that I haven't yet deleted. So, in order to start working with photos, I can click here New File, which is generally creating a new document. Here you open a photo by selecting any folder to choose it from. I prefer another way, which is opening my folder with photos and moving one of them, or several at once, directly into Photoshop window itself. So, I open the photo. I want to talk a little about the toolbar and what we have here and what we don't need. Because there are a lot of tools in Photoshop, but since we have a course on permanent makeup retouching, then we will leave only what we need for this. So, initially, upon downloading Photoshop, you'll notice the panel looks a bit differently. It goes with plenty of extra stuff pretty much of no need, which I recommend to get removed. You may simply get it done by right-click button. Thus just close all the tabs you don't need, and leave the ones of high importance, and those are layers. I have brushes and brush settings here, but I'll talk more about this a little later. If you find out you don't have some of this, you can change its configuration in the Window tab, the way I have it all: Actions, Layers, Tools, that is, everything is right there highlighted this way as you see it now. So what I would like to start with is what tools we have here and how we are going to use them. Your toolbar won't be displayed the same way as mine is now. As I removed everything what in my case I see is irrelevant, this can be done as follows. You go, Toolbar, and there, you spot the list of all tools we're going to use later on. I've settled all the tools with exact order of how I use them. The ones which duplicate others in value I usually put next to each other. You can arrange it all the same way, additionally setting your own keyboard shortcuts for each of them, just like I did. Simply at that very toolbar. I speak Ukrainian, but since my program is in Russian, I have chosen for myself abbreviations that are convenient for me in Russian, and these abbreviations correspond to the description of what I will do with these tools directly. For example, the clone stamp is letter S letter, the patch tool, letter Z, mix brush, letter M, and so on. So, now I want to show all my tools, and actually, if you decide to follow the same algorithm as I'm using for my work, I recommend to single out all the same tools. So, such tools as Move, Crop tool, Crop, Perspective, they can be all put together with one and the same button assigned for all of them, the way I have them here, with one button set. Clone Stamp Tool, Horizontal and Vertical Type Tool, Patch Tool, Spot Healing Brush, Mix Brush, Brush, Eyedropper, Eraser, Blur, Sharpen, Rectangular Marquee, Elliptical Marquee, Polygonal Lasso, Magnetic Lasso, and also the Pen Tool, Freeform Pen Tool, and finally, this is Object Selection. Here I have Quick Selection Tool and Magic Wand. Now, let's analyze some of these tools. We won't need all of them, actually. So, Selection Tool is our number one, it stands for moving photos. When we have it selected, etc., it'll be of rare use. But we'll go through it a bit later. For a quick glance at it, if I select a photo, I can then move it with this tool. I'll put it this way. The matter of it being useful or not is for each person to decide individually. Next, Crop Tool, Slice Tool, all clear. We crop the photo, slice it. All of us at least once have done this before on the phone. Usually I have a value 6 to 7 here. It's perfect when cropping photos for Instagram. I mean, instead of 5 to 4 or, as many people said, 5 to 6, exactly 6 to 7 is what we need, making excellent fit. The photo is not cut, that's why I always use it. Next, the Stamp Tool. Later on, during our next lessons, when using all these tools, I'll show you the settings for you to rewrite them if needed. So how does the Stamp Tool work? You can mouse over any area. I hold the Alt key, or Option key if using MacBook. Mouse click and see. I can transfer same thing from one place to another. This is how it works. And it's both in soft light and normal light. As a matter of fact, each tool can be customized. Here, I'll show you again. Normal light. I took and moved what I had from one spot to another. This is very convenient for defect removal, etc. So, next we have the Type tool. All clear here as well. Each of us used the Type tool at least once too. Either to sign something or insert some text. This is great for watermarks. Also, when working with banners, etc., it's up to each of you to decide. Next, the Patch tool and what can be done with it. See, on this photo I am selecting an area to replace and then drag my selected tool over the area I want to move the object from. Also, the Patch tool can work as a source or as a destination. If I want to use it as a destination, then vice versa, the area I've already drawn, I move it wherever I want. But I tend to use the Patch tool as a source. Moving on, the Spot Healing Brush, many people, too, have come across it using it in various applications. It stands precisely for spot cleanse when in need of removing the dots or specks. Its function and role is pretty much simple and clear. Then, Mix Brush tool. Nearly all the time used during the stage of frequency separation. The mix brush is responsible for blurring. This is how it happens. Of course, we won't use it this way. We better use it for another quite stylish feature. But for that we will need to perform a few more actions. 'Cause the way we got it used now, it just ends up mixing colors, just killing the texture. Therefore, you need to be very careful with this tool and be sure to consider its peculiar settings. Further on, the brush tool is also what we all are familiar with. We can choose any colors on the toolbar. I can't really say you will always use it for these purposes only, as I am now performing, but I'm just showing how it works. In our next lessons, you'll see loads of its other curious functions. Next, the eyedropper. We need this tool to move some color or draw an extra shade we don't have in disposal. So, we click the eyedropper with the mouse and choose which shade is being used now in one place or another on the photo. This is quite a fancy and useful feature. That is, we have our eyedropper transferring this shade here to our toolbar with colors, and we can now use our brush. Next, the eraser, to erase everything we've created before. You need to be extremely careful with this tool, because if you look closely, in this window you can see how it completely removes everything from the photo. That is, in Photoshop we often use layers. And this is very important. When we use eraser, it removes absolutely everything that was in this layer at that moment. Now, if more precisely, we are moving to our background layer, the very first one, we usually never work on it. If I take up the eraser to use here, it basically cleans up the entire photo, so you need to be very accurate while using it. And in my next lessons I will show a more challenging alternative to be used instead of eraser, so we don't have any of those problems the eraser can bring. Next, we have the blur tool. Again, all clear here. We use it to blur the texture of the photo, pretty much understood. You can use this tool to blur the background or something else on the photo. Also, I have exactly the same tool nearby, but this one stands for sharpening. That is, we can, on the contrary, or say, increase the pixel grade in a certain place of the photo. I'll show you now before-after, the changes appearing after using sharpen tool. See, quite visible already. Sharpening as a tool is usually very complicated for Photoshop, as sometimes it need more time to load up. Well here, we see I went a little too far with sharpening, but I did it on purpose to show what it does and how it works. Here, for example, I'm gradually removing and now sharpen gives just the right effect and highlights the pixel of our eyebrow. The rest of the tools are ones I rarely use for photo retouching, but I will show them too. Rectangular marquee tool and elliptical marquee tool, for example, to select our eye. Generally, this tool is more used for graphic images, for logos, the same with a rectangular marquee tool. Also, if we are talking about the lasso tool, then this is also quite an interesting tool. For example, if we are talking about the polygonal lasso, then I can draw straight lines like this one. Also, the magnetic lasso works in an interesting way, because this way you can cling to the path of something that we would like to select. Well, now it's certainly not perfect, it all needs to be edited. But to be honest, I rarely use it. And the most used tool for me is the usual lasso. With this tool we can select different areas, then we can save or copy them, we can paste something into them, for example, fill with content. Well, of course, this photo will come out not as we would like it to be, but later we will go through it. For example, it helps me more for the background, to make the background more picturesque. We also don't need the pen tool for standard functions. It allows us to draw various lines, etc. Those who are on my premium course will also see my working with this tool. But in fact it's not for basic retouching. Just like selecting objects, for example, you can quickly select objects, to select an eye or a face. You can thus select and cut out the background, etc. But this does not always work out. Photoshop has several other methods for selecting objects, it's just that our course is not about that a bit, I'm just talking in general about the tools I normally use. So, the first thing we need to do when already starting to fully utilizing Photoshop, we check our settings and customize them the way we want. First of all, we click on the upper button Photoshop, Settings, Basic Settings, and in the interface we can change the colors of how our Photoshop looks like, for example, make it less dark or lighter. I think it's rather tiresome for the eyes when working on a light background, which is why I always have it dark, but here everyone can dwell upon the settings and choose what fits them most. What I'd like to show you as well is this, going to export, note that I always have JPEG here and it always shows 7, this is the maximum one can possibly put here. Next, what I would also like for you to learn is performance. Here the slider should always be set to the plus sign per maximum, so that Photoshop performance, and that of your computer was at the highest level possible, so nothing slows them down and for no critical errors to happen anywhere during your photo retouching process. Also, be sure to also pay attention to this figure set for actions history, set it for maximum. 2. This figure is responsible for the number of steps that you can undo when, for example, you have made some kind of mistake. This is very helpful in case you don't plan to remove everything you have done, that is, the entire task. Thus, what we do is leave 1000 here. Next, here come all other things, not really something important or vital, but in order to have an overall picture, you can click here and there, see what's out there, and maybe you will decide to choose and customize something for your convenience. Next, what I would like to show you is editing and color adjustment. This is our third tab. And plus, I recommend you to set up this entire toolbar in precisely the same way as I did. For the color settings, this is of utmost necessity so that the photos you process on your computer look exactly the same absolutely on all your other devices, so that they don't get their color changed during the save mode. I just advise you to pause this lesson right now and set everything up in the same order and form as you see it shown in my case here. Further on, what else I wanted to tell about is keyboard shortcuts and toolbar. We have already analyzed the toolbar earlier. As for keyboard shortcuts, this is quite a vital point, because here you can select absolutely any of the tasks and assign your own keyboard shortcut for it. I personally always use the keyboard at work, and it's much more convenient than clicking the mouse button every time or using the mouse to search and select the tool you need, or when you need to save something or open a tool for this or that task. I always use keyboard shortcuts for this. It is both convenient and fast, as it helps to save time and speed up the workflow. Therefore, I recommend you, when starting your work deep down in Photoshop, already understanding its tasks fully, as well as its tools and their functions, my advice to you is to go back to this point for customizing the keyboard shortcuts in your own way, just the way you want it to be. There are some tasks in Photoshop that already have their own keyboard shortcuts, by default, set by the program itself, but they can be changed and customized individually, or you can leave them unchanged and remember them as they are. Next, we will go through the points that we will use with you in the future, and see what we can choose for customizing. Also, an important point, I definitely advise you to check the following. Sometimes when downloading Photoshop it happens that the camera raw filter is not installed with it. Therefore, if you downloaded Photoshop, but this filter was not installed with it, make sure you download this filter separately on the Adobe Photoshop website, which is free of charge. The camera raw filter is responsible for setting up our color correction, our shades, etc., which makes it possible to make our photos more colorful and picturesque. Next, we have the plastic tool. We will also use it, since this way we can do something bigger or smaller, that is, for example, narrow down or wide up, etc. I think everyone has once met up with this tool. Let's pay attention to the window. As I have mentioned earlier, be sure to select all these operations that I'm using here in the same way. The most important thing we have here: operations, layers, crop tool, application, parameters, tools. This is how I work. I recommend that all my students set everything up in exactly the same way, so that it would be convenient for me to help you in the future in case any hard moments occur, and also to make it more convenient for you to work, because I have been already working with this for years, and I have also been inventing these settings for years, so that for me, and now, I hope, for you as well, it will become as convenient as possible. So, at this stage, I reckon, we shouldn't have any problems with any setup. In our next lessons, we will analyze each tool in detail, how it works and where, in particular, what tasks we can best use it for. I wish you good luck, and once again I want to congratulate everyone on purchasing this truly wonderful course. Hopefully, it will bring you. Welcome to the second photo retouching lesson. I know perfectly well that these lessons will be watched by both permanent makeup masters who want to learn only for themselves, and future retouchers. Therefore, I tried to bring into this course the most necessary, the deepest, the most interesting and the most uncomplicated. So, we'll have 6 photos, and we'll be working on all of them in parallel and learning step by step how the retouching process works. We'll start with the basic, and gradually we will learn and master new stages in retouching. The first thing I always do with any photo, I create a new folder. Why do I do that? Because we have a background layer, and we never work on that. We always work on a copy of our background and on new layers. We always keep the background as it is in its original form. That's something to remember for sure. And with time you will learn everything, but you need a little bit of patience and a little bit of waiting. So I create our group and create a copy of the background using Command or Control+J. I have the background copy or layer 1 layer open, depending on the version of the program, and I transfer it to the group. From now on, all my actions will take place only in this group. Well, for example, I drew something on our picture. I can close the eye of our group. And all I see is our background. When I open my eye again, I can see what I did. So, I made a drawing that I don't like, and I cancel my actions with Command or Control+C. So where do we start? I believe that especially very important for beginners. First of all, what interferes with the processing of photos is redness. Redness in permanent makeup photos is almost 90% of the time present, and it always gets in our way. So, I have two ways to get rid of redness. The first method is effective probably 80% of the time, which is a lot. To do this, we go into our Camera Raw filter. Filter. Camera Raw filter. I always work with hotkeys, and I'd like everyone watching this course to memorize them gradually. Shift, Command or Control+A. We go into our Camera Raw filter. What do we see here? Basically, this camera filter is always responsible for color changes, for color correction. We can change the settings in different directions and find our ideal style. The way we want our photos to look. We can make them warmer, cooler, darker, lighter, brighter, contrast, saturation, and the like. There are so many features here, and I recommend everyone familiarize themselves with them. There's a very interesting thing as well. The first section, Basic, I use to make the final color correction, but I don't always need it. There's a color mixer. This is very interesting. Here you can vary the settings of individual shades. For example, red. See, already red, not so red, already it's become more orange. These are all values that you can change. It can both neutralize, and on the contrary, make brighter and more saturated shade. There are several tabs here: hue, saturation, brightness, and all together. Not so long ago I found for myself the perfect settings for how a photo will look if you remove the beauty. And the best part is that these settings are quite versatile. There's a very interesting thing in the Camera Raw filter called presets. Here we have two circles on the side. Now you have a lot of presets here. I've deleted them all. You can delete those as well. We're not going to need them. Here we go. Style control. There are check marks all over the place. I unchecked all the checkboxes and only left the presets. I may have created this folder myself. So you can add any style here, create your own style of photo processing, color correction, and save it. So, just by clicking on this button, you can immediately remove the redness, like in my case. Or, for example, you can make the photo warmer, cooler, darker. Maybe you do, for example, an order for 20 to 40 photos for one client, and you do all the photos under one style. This is a very handy feature that you should definitely keep in mind and do. So, after we go into the Camera Raw filter. To do that, we go to Color Mixer and start adjusting the hue, tone, saturation, brightness, and set the settings just like I did. So, hue. Reds plus 75. Purples plus 49. Magentas plus 95. Saturation. Reds minus 15. Purples minus 75. Magentas minus 63. Brightness. Reds plus 8. That's it. Now let's save our style since we've already selected all the values. Just like I did. To do that, let's click on these two circles. There's a create there. Let's select it. Redness. I already have a presets group created. You can click on new group, create it just like that, select yours and delete everything else. Do what you want to do. I don't like a lot of unnecessary stuff. As I said in the first lesson, I delete absolutely everything I don't like because I like everything to be clean and in order. Now we'll just save our preset, select it and click OK. Don't be alarmed if there's a little extra paint somewhere. We're going to clean that up. Now we're going to learn all this stuff. So, Photoshop is a very smart and cool program, and it allows us to paint with our presets like a brush. That is, we can choose a certain filter, like, for example, now we've chosen our preset, but we can apply it not to the whole photo. To create a mask, we press at the bottom. We have a key like the camera. We apply this mask exactly with our filter, where we want to change something. So, let me explain the principle of masks. The mask is always white by default. We can draw on it. It's the white mask that's in the box. It's not the photo, it's the white mask. If I take a black brush when I'm on the white mask and run a black brush over our photo, I'll get back what I had before I applied the filter, which is the original photo. I don't need that. I remove these actions with Command or Ctrl+C. I have the photo again with the same filter and the mask is clean. There's this cool thing. I double-click on this white mask and I can hit the invert button. When I hit the invert button, I have the photo again in pristine form without the filter. I close this window. The mask has gone black. I take a white brush. This makes sense. We paint the white mask with a black brush to reveal the mask. Initially, we painted with a white brush over the black mask and, in reverse order, removed the mask from the original photo. Now we're going to take some photos and things will become clearer. I hope you are not confused. So, I took a white brush. Black mask. I made the brush size 39 by 100. I always check this in the settings. I usually work with a soft round brush with a hardness of 0. And I paint over the skin. You don't need to paint densely everywhere because our photos should still be natural. If there is a little redness on them, it's not horrible or bad. Right now I'm not touching the eyes, I'm only doing the skin. This is the beauty we got. I'm clicking back and forth on our folder. I can also look at this particular layer. Our mask looks really nice. Our filter looks really nice, and we cleaned it up just on this layer. Next I'd like to show the second way to remove the redness. I opened a new photo, just like I created group, and we can do this too, working with masks, but just a slightly different order of operations. Here's what we got. The circle that's in half is crossed out, and we click on it. We choose hue/saturation. It's basically the same thing. But the preset mask is probably more versatile. I click on the eyedropper. I select the area where I want to neutralize the color. I've chosen red. Now I'm just trying to find the same skin color in the area where it does not suit me using the settings. We remember that we will be using masks and I will only be able to apply this filter in the areas where I need to remove the red tint. I make it a little greener. I remove the saturation a little. I take the brightness to the side. Well, something like this. Now let's try to see. So, I double-click on our mask. I am inverting. And with a white brush I go through the redness. As we can see, this method also managed to remove redness. A little pale, perhaps, compared to how the preset works for me. We will check now. To do this, I will hide our mask, and then we will compare it all. I will do the same here. Command or Ctrl+J. I made a copy of the background layer and placed it in the group. I will also put this one in the group and a copy for the background. I return to the camera filter raw, turn on our preset. To do this, just go to the circles, click on the preset we created. Fine. So, now I'm creating a mask to only remove redness in some areas, and not from the whole photo, because I don't really like it that way. It looks too unnatural to me. I created a mask again, inverted it to black again, took a white brush and painted where I don't like it. I draw a little on the eyebrow because there is also redness here. A little bit even touched the eye here. Because there is no focus here and it looks good. So now we're comparing. See how it was and how it is now. Now I turn off and on the mask. This is the difference we have. The hue/saturation mask made it lighter. In this photo, I like the effect of the preset more. Therefore, I simply delete the hue/saturation layer. Click on the basket below. Delete. What do I want to say? Sometimes I like hue/saturation better because the preset just doesn't work. There is nothing that fits every photo perfectly. We always choose ourselves. We are always learning. We are always looking and choosing the perfect solution for our photo. Hue/saturation I always use but in other situations. Now I will return to the photo that we edited before. Here is our eyeliner. And I don't like the whites of eyes. And just the same, I usually solve this problem with the hue/saturation function. So we open up hue/saturation, I pick up the pipette, we see a red tint here. It would seem that perhaps it is yellow, but the program knows better what shade it is. I just take the brightness to white. I was inattentive. Please note that when this arrow appears on a layer, it means that it has joined the previous layer, and on the previous layer we have nothing here, because we worked there with a mask. That is, it doesn't work. In this case, you need to unpin the layer. And now we have this layer on its own. I know it can be hard to figure things out at times like this, but we'll all learn with time. Everything will be fine. Do not worry. So, I removed a little saturation, completely removed the brightness in white, close. Invert the mask to black. I take a white brush and go over the whites of the eyes. So I completely neutralized all the redness. I may now have to make more transparent what I'm doing. If I went a little beyond the eye, for example, I purposely did more now. I just changed the brush to black and black delete what I did. So, we get the most clearly, beautifully where I drew. Here, the eye turned out, now white. Even more. And for this I have a setting such as opacity. I lower the opacity a bit. 72%. A little more. And so I think it looks quite natural, and our photo already looks much better. The redness was removed from both the eyes and the skin. Everything looks good. Now we will do it on the rest of the photos. Remove redness, remove, perhaps, somewhere yellowness, somewhere redness from the eyes. And I would like the process, and training, and retouching in the future to go as quickly as possible for everyone who takes these lessons. Therefore, we will immediately begin to learn to accelerate. In order to accelerate even at the first stages, it will be necessary to bring everything to automatism. That is, each time we do not manually select all these settings. Similarly, there are features that can be optimized to work for you. That is, I just stopped pressing some keys and forgot how to use them, because I have it all automatically. It's called Actions in Photoshop. Actions and layers are the most important thing for me. If suddenly you don't have it, go to the window and click Actions. I do not press these buttons, and these buttons are automatically pressed for me. Now we will study it. Let's move on to one of the photos that we haven't taken yet. Very red skin in this photo. Of course, it requires our intervention. And we immediately learn how to create the action. To do this, we press the plus sign, create a new action. Action. I have this action is called beginning plus redness, very convenient, beginning plus redness. It is recommended to call it the same way, because it is really very convenient to start with this procedure. You most likely have some standard actions. I removed all this in the same way as the presets. Create a folder My, and for each action you can create your own function button. For example, I have at the beginning plus redness is F1. On my computer, this keyboard shortcut FN plus F1 works. On your computer, try how it will work. If you have Windows, you may not need to press an extra key. I can also add F1 here, for example, to the Command or Shift, because the buttons can end, and there can really be a lot of operations. So, I create a name, select a set, select a function key. I don't choose now as I already have this action. And press Record. First of all, my action should be able to create a new group so that I don't have to do it myself every time. I stand on the background layer and create a copy of this layer. Command or Control plus J. I immediately transfer this to the group. This moment has already been fixed in our action. You see, the program remembered this step. I immediately go to the camera filter raw. I found our preset, redness. Okay. But I won't stop there. I will now put my cursor on any other tool. Not on a brush. I'll explain why later. I create our mask. Immediately double-click on it. Invert. Now I click on the brush and make it white. And only now I click on the square. And so I save our action. Beginning plus redness. Now I will delete absolutely everything that I have done. Now every time I open a new photo, I will click on our action or click the button that corresponds to our action. I press the play key. And now I have it all again. Why did I switch to another instrument during the recording process? To make it memorable in the action, I turned on the brush and set it to white. I'm making a bigger brush. I have opacity 39, flow 100. And I go through the skin, go through all the quality, not very tight, because sometimes the fuzzy redness even looks good. That is, it should be a little bit. This is how we did it. I made this layer a little more transparent, 90%. That's all in this photo. I removed the redness. Let's move on to the next one. The new photo is lips. And it seems that there is not much redness here, but it is there. I always start by removing beauty because 95% of photos still have redness. So, I press the F1 key. I have this beginning plus redness, and I start painting on our photo where I see redness. I pass with a white brush. I deliberately did it not very carefully, because it is much faster. I went a little on the lips, and sometimes it's even better to do so. I make a smaller brush, make the opacity 100, flow 100. Change the color of the brush. And so clearly, so as not to lose the color of our lips anywhere, I draw. Here. Original lips. We check. This is how we remove the redness. Next photo. This is called our action. And we draw. Higher. From below. I remembered that I didn't change the brush settings. I change 100 to 45 and pass. Already my brush draws more gently and accurately. Pay attention to this, change the brush settings. So, I neutralize the redness in the whole photo. Already much prettier. And here we have the same problem as with the red eye. I recommend immediately creating an action to neutralize red to white. Click the plus sign again. Red eyes. You also select a function key. Me not. Write down. We enter. Looking for hue/saturation. Detach it from previous layer immediately. With a pipette I choose a red shade for the eyes. And in this action it will be remembered that it is red. I remove the brightness completely. Saturation can also be reduced a little. That's all. Now I will flip our mask. I use another tool again and go back to the brush again. White. Fine. We save. I'm deleting to check if everything is created correctly. Red eyes. All is cool. And now in the same way I paint over the eyes with a white brush. Where is the redness? Now I'll take a black brush and paint where I want to bring back the original shade. I make this layer more transparent so the eyes aren't gray. It is so good. Let's move on to the next photo. Sometimes photos are sent in a completely different form. For example, this photo is upside down. I press Image. Image rotation. 180 degrees. Redness, turn on our action and start painting with a white brush. Chin. Nose. Everywhere. I just now switch to a black brush and set the brush opacity to 100. That's it. Now we have a beautiful lip. And immediately remove the opacity of the brush. So, we removed the redness from all the photos that I wanted to show. I also want to show you how to deal with yellow teeth in exactly the same way. Unfortunately, in these photos, there are no yellow teeth. So I will now do it artificially. To do this, for example, I will take our brush, make an orange tint. Set the blending mode to soft light. I'm doing this just to show how it works. I'll make this layer more transparent. For credibility, I'll take a mask, remove this yellow tint from the lips. I switch the brush back to normal mode. Hue saturation. You can then save this action in the same way. Just like red eyes. For example, I choose a shade with our eyedropper. Of course, the pipette saw a yellow color. I take the brightness to 0. Detach this mask from the previous layer. Invert the mask to black. But as you can see, everything turned white in the background. Our teeth are white again, beautiful, not yellow. Everything is very easy to do, just need patience. And gradually we will learn everything. This concludes our lesson on removing redness. See you at the next lesson. Hi! Today we have the third lesson on photo retouching. Today we will learn basic photo cleaning and liquefy. I want to say right away that not all tools need to be used on every photo. It's cool when we have learned everything and can already choose for ourselves whether cleaning is needed in this photo. Do I need to remove the beauty in this photo? Do I need to do liquefy on this photo? That is, we should not always work according to the same algorithm when our situation does not ask for it. So, we'll start by cleaning the photos. And to do this, we need to create a layer that combines all the layers that we have been doing up to this point. That is, in this layer, we combine absolutely all the actions that we did before. That's why I always tell my students to take every step you take seriously, because, most likely, it will be impossible to go back to it and redo something, Because now we are creating a new layer that will remember absolutely everything that you did on all previous layers. So we combine everything into one layer. The keys are responsible for this. Shift plus Option plus Command plus E on a MacBook. And Shift plus Alt plus Control plus E on Windows. Now we will clean our photo. This photo is clean enough. Of course, we will find something to find fault with. I will tell you what cleaning usually happens with 3 tools: Clone Stamp Tool, Patch Tool and Spot Healing Brush Tool. I always start with the Spot Healing Brush Tool and later work with other tools if I see that this tool does not cope. So, Spot Healing Brush Tool is necessarily always 100% hard. We choose the size ourselves. Intervals I have 25. Normal mode. Content aware. The corner is -1. I'm zooming in on our photo. The keys, Command or Control and plus or minus are responsible for this. That is, I clamped Command, plus I bring closer, minus I move away. Now I'm starting to clean the flaws that I see in this photo with the Spot Healing Brush Tool. There are quite a few disadvantages, so I eliminate some minor flaws. When I work, I often zoom in and out of photos, because it happens that it seems close that there are a lot of flaws in the photo. You delete them, delete them, delete them, and then when you move away, you look at the photo and realize that you have overdone it. So, for example, here I overdid it, because the Spot Healing Brush Tool did not cope with this moment, and I got a spot. In this case, I take the Patch Tool. It works this way for me. This one square should be lit here. New selection. Patch normal. Source. Diffusion 5. So, I select a spot and move the cursor to where I want to take the area from, and it moves the area. And I see that the stain has not been completely removed yet. I'm drawing again. And once again, in order to mix completely, it can be done an unlimited number of times. That is, it often happens that I was too lazy to cancel one operation, but now I have done 1,000,000 steps. Therefore, do not be afraid to delete, do not be lazy to delete, because it often happens that this only makes it worse. For example, I know that what I have here now is small spots of color. Colors, not texture, that's important. I will remove it later at other stages, so I leave it as it is. Check out our before and after. Let's just look at cleaning. By the way, in order not to get confused, I recommend signing the layers. Cleaning. For myself, I do not do this, but for the course, why not? So that everyone who watches this course has an idea of what is happening here. There were small stains here, I remove them. There is no need to strive for a complete ideal because it is not always needed. The skin is not perfect. The client is not perfect. And usually my clients want more natural photos. And if you are a future retoucher, I also recommend working in natural techniques. If you are a master, especially. It's even worse when your clients see that the photos are really heavily retouched. I took the Spot Healing Brush Tool, made it very small and removed the dust particles that are in the photo. The main thing to consider is that there are glare here, and in no case should they be removed. Everything should be beautiful, everything should be neat. I see that there is a piece of pigment left, I also remove it. Square brackets are responsible for increasing and decreasing. The open bracket is for reducing the size of the brush. The closed bracket is an increase in the size of the brush. I see that I have a speck here. I take the Patch Tool and try to remove it. Everything seems to work out well. Perfect. I like the top lip. I move to the bottom of the photo. Here we have shortcomings. I also see that some kind of stain has appeared. Bring to the ideal. So, it's always interesting for me to perfectly preserve my client's work, so that everything is beautiful enough and natural enough. Of course, there are different orders. Some like to change and improve their work. I will show you how it can be done in this program. But I urge you not to abuse these features and be honest with your customers. So, here I did a basic cleaning and move on to the next photos. Similarly, we combine all the layers Shift plus Option plus Command plus E on the MacBook. And Shift plus Alt plus Control plus E on Windows. And I'm starting our cleaning.
I can't sleep, yeah. Only miss you when I'm breathing in too deep, yeah. Am I I just your little secret? I didn't hear the sirens. I didn't wanna see the warning signs, and now I pay the price, yeah.
So, I did a basic cleansing of the skin and move on to the eyes. It is not enough that we remove the redness. I want to clean them up a bit. I'm trying to remove blood vessels. If I don't succeed, I'll do it with other tools later. I continue to clean my eyes and skin.
Every time you say my name, it hits me like a tidal wave. It hits me like a tidal wave. A tidal wave. Tidal wave. Tidal wave. Tidal wave. I was so blind.
And so the only thing I left here is the wrinkles. Often in many photographs, where older women are. For example, eyeliner on an aged eye. I don't touch the texture of the skin, because if the artist photographed eyeliner on aged skin, he wanted to show how he makes eyeliner on aged skin, and it does not need to be rejuvenated. But if, for example, I have small wrinkles, I can remove it. I'll clean it up now with the clone stamp tool. So, I select the stamp clone. I have 0 hardness. Normal mode, 100% opacity. Alignment, current layer. How does the clone stamp tool work? We are approaching the area that we want to represent. Hold down Option or Alt and at this moment press the mouse. Thus, we have found what we need. And we transfer this section to where we intend to transfer it. There we draw our brush and a cross follows me. It shows where it's making the transfer from. So I painted over the wrinkle. I also see that I drew 2 small wrinkles here. And for this, I just take the spot healing brush and point out these wrinkles. You can also try to remove small hairs. I rarely delete because it usually looks unnatural. This photo is not on the cover of a magazine, so everything should be natural. Now I continue removing the rejection that is left in the photo.
Sirens. I didn't wanna see the warning signs, and now I pay the price, yeah. Oh, I should've known.
Well, now I'm definitely happy with how this photo looks. I name this layer cleaning. And we move on to the next photo. Here we have lips. We merge all layers Shift plus Option plus Command plus E on MacBook. And Shift plus Alt plus Control plus E on Windows. I recommend writing down a set of keys for yourself and start using them right away so that in the next lesson you will already know which sets of keys to use without me reminding you. So, we start by cleaning the nose from hairs. To remove fine hairs, use a small point healing brush. Gently cleanse the skin of the upper lip from hairs. The skin on the lips and around the lips.
Just your little secret. I didn't hear the sirens. I didn't wanna see the warning signs, and now I pay the price, yeah. Oh, I should've known. It hits me like a tidal wave. Every time you say my name, it hits me like a tidal wave.
Great! We have finished the painstaking part of the work. As you can see, in this photo I used all the tools mentioned earlier. With a little experience, you can easily master them. I give a name to this layer. Compare before and after. I want to show you how to make your nose more beautiful. I'll take the brush, switch it to black. Blend mode is normal. Opacity, let it be 25. I almost always have 100 flow and I rarely change it. The size of the brush makes smaller. I go up and very carefully draw the inside of the nose. This movement was superfluous, I think. So I press Command or Control plus C and remove the last step. Now the shadow has become a little different. Done. Look before and after. Wonderful. I like. I also saw a stain here. I also want to remove it. That's all. We move on to the next photo. Here we have enough. Everything is beautiful. However, there are some details that need to be clarified. Merge all layers into one. And I, as usual, give a name to this layer. And we begin to clean this photo from the shortcomings. I want to pay attention to this mole. It's hard to remove, but we'll try. First, I'll try using the patch tool. The result is not ideal. Next option. Let's try the clone stamp tool. I see that the mole seems to be painted over, but something is not right here. For this I am trying to create a mask. Leave the mask white. I take a black brush and remove a little where there is an extra border. And I'm getting my lashes back. I see that the skin turned out lighter than it should be. Now I'm back in the photo. No longer on the mask, but in the photo. I'll take a brush, set the blend mode to soft light and paint a little with a black brush. It turned out a little darker than I would like. But I was close. Cancel. And I take a bigger brush and just 2 clicks will do it. Well, I think it's better this way. I immediately switch the brushes to the normal blending mode and continue to clean up our photo.
Just your little secret. I didn't hear the sirens. I didn't wanna see the warning signs, and now I pay the price, yeah. Oh, I should've known. It hits me like a tidal wave every time you say my name.
So, everything is ready. I move on to the next photo to do a basic brushing. To do this, I again merge all the layers, give a name to this layer. At this stage, I already count on the fact that you have memorized the keyboard shortcut and the sequence of actions. I'm starting to improve this photo with our 3 tools. I'm almost done with this photo. I hope that much has become clear at this meeting with you. If something doesn't work, you can ask me. Even if we have a course without comments, I will definitely answer questions if something is not clear to you. And in general, what else is cool about Photoshop? Unlike permanent makeup, here you can use Google. Google knows a lot of answers to questions. There are a lot of great tips and ideas on the internet. So, this photo is clean. I don't really like the eye, but I'll clean it. I'll show you a little later. Let's move on to the last photo with cleaning. I merged all layers. Cleaning. Here, too, we have very little to clean. Let's start. So, at this point, I consider the photo cleaned up. Like I said, There's not much here. Now we move on to the next interesting topic. I always do this step after processing. Transform. Let's start with a photo of the lips. Before the liquefy step, I always merge all the layers into a new layer in the same way as before cleaning. I give a name. In order to make liquefy, we turn on the filter, liquefy. Or Shift plus Command or Control plus X. Now I will show the tools that can be applied in liquefy. And, as I said, liquefy is not a mandatory step. But I have to show how it works. We recommend making the same settings as mine. I develop them for myself, as I like, as it is convenient for me to work. Tools I will use. The first one is the Forward Warp tool. Density 50, rate 31. Here I can also increase and decrease the brush with square brackets. I can tweak the shape of the lips a little. I do it only if the customer asked. These are all the tools I don't use. You can try them yourself. The second tool I recommend is the Pucker tool. Density 22, rate 45. By the way, click on the pin edges. Now I will show what happens if you do not apply this function. We are working on the edge of this photo and here we get a blank photo. I undo our actions and show the same when this feature is enabled. Photoshop does the continuation of the photo on its own. I remove this action and am back to our pin edges. Thanks to this tool, we can emphasize our lip contour. That's the way. And it is very important to do it quite gently, very carefully, to keep the photo natural. There is also the Bloat tool. This tool, on the contrary, works to increase. I don't usually use it. Perhaps someone will use it to enlarge their eyes somewhere and so wanted. There is also a very cool feature called the Freeze Mask tool. I'll show you how it works in these pictures. For example, I want to lower my lip, but I don't want my bottom lip to go down. To do this, I draw the borders of the lower lip. I take the deformation tool forward and drag the lip down. Of course, everything is very exaggerated. I just want to show the tool. I take a defrost. I increase the brush and remove what I drew. You closed your mouth and removed your teeth in this way. I remove these actions and save this photo. See before and after and move on to the next photos. Combine the layers into one layer. Give it a name. Open Liquefy, Shift plus Command or Control plus X. In this photo, I would not change anything. But in order to demonstrate all the functions, I will take the Bloat tool to enlarge the eye a bit. I am done with one click. Density 50, rate 80. By the way, when you work with a whole portrait, here you can enlarge the eyes. Change the height of the eyes, the distance between the eyes. Forehead, nose, lips, smile and so on. Here's what else we can do on this photo, a clear border under the eyebrow. And for this I use the Pucker tool. I never change the settings. Only the size of the brush. And just once I pass along the lower border of the eyebrow. I made a slightly clearer border. Same here. I see, which is a little uneven here, so we tighten it up a bit. Okay. Save and do the same with the rest of the photos.
Hits me like a tidal wave. Every time you say my name, it hits me like a tidal wave. It hits me like a tidal wave.
Now that I'm done with Liquefy, I want to show in a couple of photos with eyes what I would do in order to make them as perfect as possible. I create again a new layer. I'll name it Eyes and I'll grab the Mixer Brush tool. We press this button, which clears our layer. Necessarily. We should always have squares here, gray and white, and always have a clean brush. This button is also responsible for cleaning the brush. Clean the brush after each stroke. Each brush has its own settings. It took me a long time to find the perfect ones for me. I recommend that you set up this tool the same way. 20, 20, 20, 30, 15%, 0 degrees. I also pay attention to Photoshop. For 2023 there is a small problem, and he often makes the first brush stroke colored. Pay attention to this and always clean the brush before working with it. If suddenly there was some kind of color. This problem has not yet been resolved. But, I hope, very soon the issue will be resolved and you will be more lucky than everyone else. So, I took a brush, and I carefully go over the white of the eye in order to still save a little of this shadow. Now it looks too blurry. Likewise the rest. Now I make this layer opaque. Well, let it be, for example, 34 to begin with. Let's see before after. We managed to make the eyes more beautiful and clean. We will add a lighter shade later. I'll add some opacity. 50%. 50% looks good. This is how we leave this layer. I like him. Why am I doing this on a separate layer? Because I needed to remove the opacity of this layer. For example, if we do liquefy or clean and make this layer transparent, then in this case we are left with half of what we have done. For example, I will show in a more understandable photo. If we take liquefy and set the opacity to 50, then we have lost clarity, because the previous layer had no liquefy, but here we have already done it, and it turns out that everything that we did on this layer became only half visible, and previous layers are now showing through under the photo. So keep an eye on it. It's better to move to a new layer and make new actions. I'm looking for where else I have an eye that I would like to do so. Not here, because here we have a lot of eyelashes, and we don't need to do this. I think in this photo we will make a new layer for the eye in the same way. Again, the mixer brush tool. I work with this tool always from light to dark. From light to dark. You should not be embarrassed now by the fact that an off-white shade is obtained near the eyes. It's okay. Brightening eyes is very easy. So, a little further away to have a look. And make this layer more transparent. 62%. Fine. As for lightening the eyes, you can try even on this layer. I'll show you how. If, for example, I can't wait, I take a brush, take a white shade, blend mode. Soft light. And I'm trying to paint over our semi-transparent layer. I take the opacity of the brush, for example 63. Let's try it and see. I don't like it, it fits tightly. Let's make the opacity smaller, for example, 31. And a smaller brush. Not as soft as you would like. I'll make it even more transparent. It happened. So this method is working. But I will show another one that I like better. This method can be used to tint the eyebrow or slightly change the shade somewhere. I return the blend mode to normal and remove what I was doing, because later I will show a different way. So, with that, we say goodbye to this lesson. And the next lesson we will have is difficult, but very interesting, the most long-awaited for working with the skin. Hi all. So we have lesson 4 today. It will be dedicated to frequency separation. For me, this is the most interesting thing in retouching, because this is what I started doing retouching for. This is what makes the skin beautiful, smoothed, but still with a natural texture. This is the same Photoshop effect that each of us wants to achieve, and today we will learn how to do it. Initially, for a beginner, the frequency separation process is always very difficult due to the fact that there are a lot of layers to create. A lot of information will have to be remembered, but we will try to quickly master everything and quickly create our actions, as we already created with redness. So, let's start with this photo. This is just a very good example. For permanent makeup photos, I want to achieve maximum naturalness. And today we will study the very method that allows you to preserve the maximum texture and make the most natural skin in the photo, so that there is no effect of blurring. Let me clarify right away that there are a very large number of frequency separation methods. I have used 4 or 5 different methods in my practice. They all give a similar result. Some were better, some were worse, some were more natural, some were less natural. But the point is the same, and I found the perfect way for myself. And I hope you like it too. So anyway, as usual, we create a new layer that combines all of our previous layers. And this layer I call color, and I make a copy of it Command or Control plus J, and this layer I call texture. So now we have 2 layers, and we turn off the texture layer. Here's this eye. We close it. We click on the color layer. We go to Filter. Filter. Blur. Gaussian blur. And now we're going to customize the value for each photo. We need a value that does not show skin imperfections and texture, but still shows a little bit of hairs on the eyebrows, eyelashes, wrinkles on the lips. We start looking. I'm trying 8. Now we're still showing texture. So we need to increase the value. Now we've blurred the eyelashes. In this photo, I've got 17 and 6. I'm keeping it. Now I'm going to go from the color layer to the texture layer, making this layer visible. It's all back again. That's the way it's supposed to be. And in order to manifest the texture on this layer, we go to Image. Apply Image. Layer. We select the layer that we named Color. Here we always choose the color layer that we created before. The channel is always RGB. Blending. Always subtract. This is how gray the photo should be. Opacity 100. Scale 2. Offset 128. OK. If the photo turned out this gray, then you did everything right. Now in this layer, we need to change the blending mode to liner light. So, I'm going to explain now what we've done. We have now separated our photo into 2 frequencies, texture and color. That is, this layer is only responsible for the color spots, and when we work on this layer, we don't affect the texture of the photo. When we work on the color layer, we only work on the colored spots on the skin and things like that. And so, for example, the hairs in our skin texture will not be affected in any way when we work on this layer. Similarly, if I work on a texture layer, I still have all the colors, and I'm only working in the texture. Exactly with the hairs, the skin texture, maybe with some other imperfections. For example, on this layer 2, you can clean up blemishes with the spot healing brush tool and other tools that we learned about in the last lesson. But I prefer to clean the photo completely already before this step, as we did. So we have these 2 layers created. Now, when we're on the texture layer, we're going to make a copy of that layer. Command or Control plus J. Now you need to hold down the Option or Alt key. We hold the key, and with the mouse cursor we are looking for this arrow and a square between the 2 layers. That is, we have to put the cursor between the 2 layers so that this square appears. And click the mouse. In this way, I have attached the top layer to the bottom layer. We set this layer to the normal blending mode. Now we don't have any extra harshness or noise. Why am I doing this? Look. With the patch tool, I want to move the texture from one place to another. You see, the colors are still there, it's the texture that's been transferred. Of course, this gives a blurry effect on the eyebrows. We don't pay attention to that. This is an example. Now if I need to make this layer more transparent, I make it half transparent, and nothing changes except for this one area. If I were to work on the texture layer without a copy, and I made this layer more transparent, I would have the texture gone and I wouldn't be able to restore it. That's why we always make copies of layers. So now we go to the color layer. Same thing with Command plus J. Now we have a copy of the color layer. For the same reason, we're going to work on a copy of the color layer, so that we don't have this. The more transparent I get the color layer, the more texture I get. The more transparent the texture layer, the less texture on the color. I hope I'm clear. I've explained why I'm making these layers with copy. I make sure I have 100% everywhere. And we start working on the copy of the color layer. I've got the mixer brush tool. I'm checking all the values. 20, 20, 20, 30, 15%, 0. Here I have it crossed out. And I click Clean Brush. Usually I always work the mixer brush tool across the photo from light to dark. It matters because if we work from dark to light, we're going to have a photo that starts to be gray. So, for example, if I take this dark area right here and start blurring it all over the place, I'm going to have a photo that starts to get muddy. And that's not the worst photo. There are times, really highly visible shadows in photos, and it can look bad. What does our mixer brush tool do? In the whole process, we blur the shades so that we have them even. And yet, we don't affect the texture and the photo stays natural. So we always try to work from light to dark. And we always try to keep all the highlights and all the relief in the photo. Here we have a nose. The back of the nose should always be lighter. The wing of the nose should be darker. We have to keep it that way. We have to work here as carefully as possible. So, less talk, more action. Let's get started. For example, I see that this is the lightest area. I'll start there. I don't touch the eyebrows at all at these stages. That's the master's job. I don't touch that. From here, I go up, up, up. Gently. In a circular motion. I may increase the brush a little bit. The square brackets will help you increase and decrease the brush size. I'm getting closer to the darker area, the shadow. I'm pulling the photo back to see. And we can see how much the skin has smoothed out. If at this point you think the skin is smoothed out too much, don't worry. What you see is not the final stage. I'm carefully drawing along the back of the nose without touching anything else. And I've left it light. Here I also try to keep the shades as light as possible. I even managed to lighten the skin under the eye. Let's go to this area. I take a light shade under the eyebrow and draw. Here I'm taking a little bit bigger brush so that I can blend this shade here and make it look quite organic and beautiful. Now I have a light area here, and I'm painting under my eye. I don't usually take my finger off the mouse. If I've got a light color, I'm going to stretch it out wherever I need it in the vicinity. I usually like a circular motion, then I can gently blend all the shades. I let my finger off the mouse. I come to the dark area, I draw dark on the wing of the nose. I let my finger off the mouse usually only when I need to change or take a new color that I'm going to stir. So, I'm done in this picture. Now I can get a little closer to the eyebrow, make the brush smaller to blur that light shade. Even in this case, I'm not touching the eyebrow. There's a little bit of light left, but that's enough at this stage. So, now I can take a slightly bigger brush. And if I need to blend the brow a little bit, I could do that. This only works in cases where I need to do it a little bit. I can add a slightly lighter shade to the brow or vice versa, make it more dark. I'm not doing that, I'm just showing the possibilities of this feature. So, I'm looking at my photo. I'm looking at before and after. I really like what I got, but I like more natural photos, so I'm making this layer opaque. I think 57 will be fine. And I got the softest blending possible. Then I go to a copy of the texture layer. And I can do something with the texture. I'm really missing a texture in this place, that's how it was originally, but I can try to add one. I take the patch tool. I circle the spot where I'm missing the texture, and I try to move the texture from there. That's how I got the texture. One more piece. Let's see what I got. I don't like it very much. There's a trace here and here. I'm trying to blend it all in. Sometimes when I can't get a certain area, I can smudge the texture a little bit to make it softer. That way it's easier to work with and it looks much better. Now I just take the mixer brush tool and work a little bit on the area where I had a joint that I couldn't remove. I'll try to replace it with something else. I guess I like it that way. And in order not to have, if anything, clear transitions, I can make this layer a little bit more transparent. And that's how I got it perfect. I'm happy with it now. I think I'll add a little more sharpening later, but on another layer. I also still want to show that if we're not happy with the fact that we have this light area above the eyebrow, we can go back a copy of the color layer. I'm going to take a brush. Mode normal. 30. 100. I'm gonna take the dropper, I'm gonna take the skin tone that I want to transfer to the white area. I remember that we're only working with color, and it's not going to ruin the eyebrow. I take and draw it in. I think I'll take a slightly darker brush color and draw it in a little more. Here I take the eyedropper again and pick a new shade because the face is tilted and it's a different color there. And then a little bit here I've added a little bit of tint too. When I see that there's a piece that I've painted, but I don't like it. I can take the mixer brush tool again and blend the shades in between. Now it's perfect. We're looking at the before and after. Also at this stage we can try to take a white brush. I did 20. 100. And we can lighten the whites of the eyes a little bit. Like this. Look at the before and after. Super. I'm going to move on to the next picture. And these are our lips. Now we need to create an action to fully memorize this, because we're going to be doing this on every photo now. So to create an action, again, let's click on the plus square icon. Title. Frequency separation. Remember this. When you create layers, you need to name them. Because if you don't, the program will target the specified parameter as the first layer. But if you already had layers with other names, the program may simply not understand this operation. And an error will occur. So do everything clearly according to my instructions. I merged all the layers into a new layer. I've named it color. I create a copy of this layer. Texture. I make the texture layer invisible. Back to the color layer. Filter. Blur. Gaussian blur. And I look for my value. Low quality photos have a smaller radius. The higher the quality of the photo, the higher this value. So you should always look at how the photo looks. Here I'm going to choose a value of 20. The photo is blurred, but the wrinkles on the lips are visible, as I said. Okay. Let's go to the texture layer. Make it visible. Image. Apply image. Layer. Color. Channel. RGB. Blending. Subtract. Opacity 100. Scale 2. Offset 128. OK. Blending mode. Linear light. I created a copy of the texture layer. I press Option or Alt, use the cursor to find an arrow between the two layers and attach the top layer to the bottom layer. A copy of the texture layer. Blending mode. Normal. Back to the color layer. I make a copy of that layer. I choose the mixer brush tool. This is where I turn off the action. Here we can see all the steps that we've done. Before I minimize this list, I find the Gaussian blur step here and click next to it. Here's a box like this, I fill it in. This is so that we don't have the default number 20 that I chose for this photo. So now every time I turn on the action, the program will ask me what value I want to choose when I do the blur. Now we're minimizing this action. We're done. Let's get to the retouching. I take the mixer brush tool and start working. We always work with color on a copy of the color layer. I see a light area and start my work from there. I work the skin around the lips without touching the lips. Gently work my way up to the dark area. Trying not to mix the dark with the light too much so that it doesn't get messy. I'm going to work through the bottom of the photo now so I can deal with the hardest part later. I'm going to move on to the chin. I'm going to make the brush a little bigger. I'm going to draw it in. Here I take a light shade from the cheek area. I've reduced the brush a little bit and I'm going down the photo again. I've worked on the nose. And now from the light area, I'm carefully approaching the dark area. Now slightly reducing the brush, I draw carefully, so that this shadow remains and so that it does not look dirty. Great! And now in the same exact way with a mixed brush I can work our lips in a little bit to make the color more even. I'm receding to look at our photo. Before after. Before after. Beautiful. Due to the fact that I chose a fairly high value when blurring. Most retouchers leave photos like this. And don't make this layer more transparent. A lot of people like this. I'll make this layer a little more transparent to make it look more natural. I like it as natural as possible. Now I'm just going to try to add some texture to the skin above the upper lip. To do that, on a copy of the texture layer, I'm going to take the sharpen tool. And I'm going to draw just a little bit on the skin above the lip. I think it looks a lot prettier because it's got a little bit of texture. And that's what I was trying to do here. I'm looking at it. I'm drawing a little bit more. That's good. I'm going back to color copy. I want to blend a little bit more. Yeah. That's the best. And by the way, I also want to show you the brush tool trick again. We press the dropper, pick a medium shade. Okay. And then we can paint some color on our lips. So you can change the color of the lips. That's the picture we got. It looks cool and natural. Okay, we've got a new photo with beautiful lips. We turn on action, select a value. So, like, 16. No, I can still see the wrinkles. You can see it at 20. Make it 22. That's fine. Macro photos are often a problem because beginners don't know how to retouch neatly. Let's start to do a light to dark blending. I have a big enough brush. I smudged the lip. So I'm removing it. Now I'm carefully approaching the dark shadow, but I'm not touching it hard. Just a little bit of blending. Now I'm approaching the lips, not very close. I'm going to brush the area around the nose, one side and one side. A little bit on the lips to make the shade more uniform. Now I'm going to make the layer more transparent. I'm looking at what I've got. I don't like the area under my nose. So I take the brush tool. I chose a shade. I set the opacity to 30. I'll see how I did. I really like it. Let's go to the next photo. And repeat everything we did before.
I can't sleep, yeah. Only miss you when I'm breathing in too deep, yeah. Am I just your little secret? I didn't hear the sirens. I didn't wanna see the warning signs, and now I pay the price, yeah.
So we did frequency separation on this photo. It turned out beautifully, delicate and realistic. I noticed that the texture near the eyebrow is quite clear. Some people like that and some people don't. If you don't like it, you can open a copy of the texture layer and draw this area with mixer brush tool in one neat step. After that you can make the layer a little bit more transparent. Let's see. Alright. The texture has gotten a little softer, but it's still visible. We can also remove these spots on the texture. I can darken this area a little bit so we don't have that smudge. This photo is pretty simple. I love pictures of eyes. They always look beautiful. When we're sure this photo is ready, we'll move on to the next photo. In this photo I want to show you why it is so important to choose the right value for blur. The lower the value we choose on a quality photo, the less natural the retouching will be. For example, if we choose a value of 5, we can see everything. Texture, all the hairs, eyelashes. Okay. I take the mixer brush tool, and what do I see? It immediately colors absolutely everything and our photo becomes very blurry, as if we did it in a phone app. There are those who really like this effect. Of course, we can make this layer more transparent. And even so, the texture is too blurry. I don't like that option. So I press Command or Control and select all 4 layers that are included in the frequency separation action. I delete them by clicking on the trash can. I apply the action again and now I'll do the opposite high value to preserve the texture as much as possible. Like 29. Okay. And let's get to work. Try not to smudge where we have dark areas. I'm going to go through the light area. As we can see, the texture has shown up even more with this method. Now I draw on the darker area. Again I take the light area to lighten the skin under the eye. Gently draw onto the eyebrow. I can still blend the darker shade of the eyebrow a little more. That's optional. I'm going to make this layer a little bit more transparent. That's fine with me. Some would say that the texture is too prominent here. I can just see that we have some spots here that I want to remove. I use the patch tool to do that. Now I'm going to make this layer a little bit more transparent. That's it. I'm making the final edits. Photoshop is always a very creative process. There is no one algorithm anywhere. Every retoucher works differently. And every photo is different. I think I'm overdoing it. I'm gonna try to smooth it out a little bit with the mixer brush tool. I can see that it's still not perfect. That's my problem. I always want to get it perfect. I'm going to try on the bottom layer with the texture to change this. I turn off the top layer. I took the eraser tool and removed the texture where I don't like it. And I'll try now to enhance this area with the clone stamp tool. Mode soft light. I'm trying it. It's working. Now I'm gonna turn on the top layer, make it transparent. What I was doing there. And that's how I got it. It's pretty neat. Together I have 2 layers with texture added. For a perfect result I had to experiment here and I'm glad that I could show it to you. In this photo, I can also lighten the eyes on the color copy layer. For this I took a white brush, reduced it and make the brush more transparent. You don't have to change the settings on top to do this. You can do it on your keyboard. For example, if I want to make the opacity of the brush 30, I press the number 3 on my keyboard. If you want 100, you press 10 on your keyboard. To change the flow, I press Shift and also press a number. For example, now I press the 4 key. And I get a value of 40. I go back to 100. And I'm now getting an opacity of 30 over 100. Carefully with a white brush I paint. I don't really like the way the color lays down. So I'm going to make our brush even more transparent, like 15. To do that, I quickly pressed 15 on my keyboard. And this is the eye I got. Now I'm looking at the before and after. I see here I want to make a natural shadow. For that I can create a white mask. I'll take a black brush, make it opacity 50. I'll use the black brush to make a little shadow. I look at how my photo looks now. It's good, I'm happy with it. Let's go to the last photo. Let's turn on our action. Here I see the high quality of the photo. I realize I need to choose a large radius here. I'll give it a try. 35 is still not enough. I'll try 40. 45. Let's try 50. Let's start blending. So, when I did the blending, I saw that the photo came out very sharp, absolutely all the texture was preserved. The question is whether you like it or not. I showed two different situations. Working with a very low radius and working with a very high radius. I don't like that. So on the texture copy layer, I'm just going to take the mixer brush tool and make the texture a little bit softer. Now I'm going to make this layer more transparent. This way, we've achieved the perfect look. So, I'm really glad we finally got this tutorial figured out. It's a very interesting one. I'm sure most people bought this course to learn how to work beautifully with skin. I hope you get the hang of it quickly. I wish you the best of luck. See you in the new lesson. Hello. So, we have a new lesson. Today we're going to be learning about dodge and burn. Now it seems to be something unknown and incomprehensible. But I assure you that very soon everything will become clear and everything will fall into place. Because this is also a very interesting technique. And I would like to teach it to you as soon as possible. What we will learn to do today will give you the opportunity to make your photo more spectacular and three-dimensional. First, we will need to create a new transparent layer. What's the difference between a transparent layer and any layer we've worked with before? In the past, we've always worked with what we have in the photo. Simply put, we have a photograph. It's a color layer. Here we had a texture layer, for example. In all of these cases, we worked with a photograph. Now we create a transparent blank layer. You can see that it's different from the other layers. It doesn't duplicate the image. It's transparent. And when we draw on this layer, a drawing will appear here. You can imagine that this layer is like a glass on top of the painting. To work with dodge and burn, I changed the mode of this layer to soft light. In the soft light blending mode, we mostly just use the white and black shade. If we have a different color in the palette, we just click this little square, and we restore our palette to black and white. The letter D on the keyboard is also responsible for restoring the palette. In order to change the colors between black and white on the keyboard, we press the X key. This is very convenient when you are working and constantly changing your value. So, let's start by working through the light area. I'm going to zoom in on the brush. Making brush settings. Opacity 9. Flow 100. Now I'm going to try to add a little bit of volume and a little bit of shadow. I paint with a white brush on the highlights to emphasize the glare. A little more. This way I will add volume to the photo. I can also lighten the white of the eye a little bit. I try to do it as carefully as possible, so as not to lighten the eyelashes. If on this layer I drew something unnecessary, I cannot create a mask, but just remove it with an eraser, because on a transparent layer, using an eraser, you remove only what you drew on this layer. And you can draw there again later. So also on this layer I can draw a little bit on the eye to make the eye look more expressive. And now I can switch to the black brush by pressing either this arrow or the X key. And, for example, I can add a little bit of a vignette effect here, darken it a little bit, and here a little bit. And for example, I can do like a little frame on our eye. So the eye will look even more expressive. You can also make the space between the lashes a little bit darker in this way. I love that effect. I can't say that I always use it, because it's not always necessary. But sometimes it is very appropriate, and adding shadows and highlights makes the photo much more beautiful. Now we move on to the next photo. We'll have more work to do here. First of all, we're going to create an action. To do this, we again click at the bottom to create a new action. It's the same as usual. I'm going to name it Dodge and Burn. You can choose a function key. We press record, I create a transparent layer. Soft light. Dodge and burn. I also recommend that you immediately click on any tool and after that on brush tool. Save our action. Done. So, what would I do in this photo? I might lighten the forehead and bridge of the nose a little more to add a little more volume to our photo. I might lighten the underbrow a little bit. Do a highlighter effect. Lighten the area under the eye a little bit. Often at this stage I lighten the white of the eye a little bit. I also lighten the eye a little bit and make it brighter. I want to draw your attention to the fact that at this point the black and white shades are not working as colors. White is a brightening and black is a darkening of the shades that are in this photo. For example, if I draw on the eyebrow with black now, it will just get darker. Not black. I'm undoing my actions. So also, of course, on this layer, I can take another color as well. For example, if I have it be some shade of blue. I'll turn up the opacity a little bit, like 30. Since I have yellow eyes, I got purple instead of blue. We can also change the color of the lips with this method. I'll show you that later on. Well, it was just an exaggerated example here. In a photo like this, I can still, for example, slightly emphasize the darker shade of the eye itself. That's what we have here. I can also darken the spot. I could deepen the color of the eyebrow if I wanted to. But I don't want to do that. I'm going to add some volume from the nose. Also, I noticed that I didn't paint over the light spot here. I'm going to go back to the color copy layer. I can still do this because I haven't yet created a layer on top that combines all the previous layers. I'm going to take a brush, I'm going to take a dropper of the color I want, I'm going to reduce the brush, I'm going to make the opacity of the brush, like 50, and I'm going to paint this white spot. I'm going to blend the colors using the blended brush tool. Since we're learning the dodge and burn technique, I'm going to talk about how to use this method to remove blemishes on the face. I very rarely use this method, I don't really like it. But I know that many retouchers are fans of this method and sometimes even use it instead of frequency separation. I'll show you and you decide if you like it or not. First, let's go back to the dodge and burn layer. Now we need to create a black and white mask. Let's separate this layer from the previous layer. I'm also going to include another mask here. Curves. Now I need to tweak the color of the photo so that the stain becomes visible. Now I'm going to go back to the dodge and burn layer. I choose the black brush since the stain is white. Now we only have white and black spots. I adjust the opacity of the brush and try to carefully paint over the stain. Now I want to see how I've treated this area. To do this, I make the curves layer and the black and white layer invisible. And we can see that this area now looks perfect. The stain is gone. That's all the magic. Let's move on to the next images. I'm here again. Now we're going to learn how to make lip photos more luscious and sexy. We're going to start by turning on action as usual. Let's try to change the color of the lips. Let's open the palette and choose the future color for the lips. Let's try to experiment with a bright shade like this. Sometimes people ask me to do that. That's how easy it is to change the lip color. I erase it with an eraser. I hope you can see that it's very simple. I go back to the brush tool, press X to return the palette to black and white. In dodge and burn, you can lighten the teeth. In this photo, I want to make some of the highlights more saturated, like here. The opacity of the brush is 10. On the chin. Now I take the black brush and add shadows where it's already there. For example, under the lip. I love pictures of lips the most. They're the juiciest. I can also do a white stripe over the lip. You've seen that a lot. Originally, such a line was always left in photos from anesthesia, and later retouchers found the advantage and beauty in it. I don't always do it. But in some photos it looks fantastic. I reduce the brush. I pick up the brush settings and very carefully draw a thin line over the lip. If my drawing is a little bit on the lip area, I can remove it later with an eraser. I always try to do the line above the lip in one motion, without taking my finger off the mouse. If I do it sporadically, the line will get different saturation and it will look sloppy. So now I'm going to take the eraser. The eraser setting here is 70 and 100. I'm going to minimize it and gently erase the imperfections. And I've also made more subtle transitions at the beginning and end of the line. If I see that some of the light shade is more saturated and some is less saturated, that's okay. You can add a little shade where it is lacking, but I do not do it, because it is a photo of a living person and cannot be all the same and symmetrical. The skin color is also different in all areas, so it's okay. I can also make this layer a little bit more transparent. And we'll move on to the next two pictures. I'm speeding up and you're watching.
Every time you say my name, it hits me like a tidal wave. It hits me like a tidal wave. A tidal wave. Tidal wave. Tidal wave. Tidal wave. I was so blind, waiting patient on the shoreline. Now you're leaving, but I know you got your reasons too. I didn't hear the sirens.
Now that we've applied lightening and darkening to all the photos, I want to show you how to make a beautiful skin tone. At this point, I do this on almost all of the photos. I choose a new mask. Solid color. I have a ready-made shade that I always apply. Value C587661. Now I recommend that you copy this value. Invert the mask from white to black. Tan. We take a white brush. When we paint a new skin color with a brush, it's important to keep your hand on the mouse and do it in one motion, because if we do it intermittently, the color will be layered and the skin will be blotchy. We're probably going to take a brush setting of 25 and 100. I usually use an opacity of 10. But for you, I've chosen a high value for clarity. I'm going to paint over the black mask with a white brush. I might paint over the lips a little bit. I did that on purpose. It's like this. With this color, the skin in the photo looks much more expensive and cooler. Now I'm going to take a black brush and reduce it. Opacity 100 and 100. And remove what I drew on the lip. Done so I can also make this layer more or less transparent. Here I'm going to leave it that way because I really like this skin color. Let's move on to the next photo. So, let's create the action. Make sure you have the topmost layer selected. It's going to be more convenient that way. New action. Tan. Solid color. I love the shade that I'm applying because I've been searching for the perfect one for a long time. You can choose another one or use mine. You can paste the color we copied in the previous photo. Let's invert the mask from white to black. Take the brush. Save it and start working. I make the opacity of the brush again 25 and start working on the forehead. In this photo, the 25% looks much more intense than in the previous photo. Without releasing the mouse button, move down to the nose, cheeks. Here I let go of the brush to make it smaller and to draw the area under the eyebrow. I try not to touch the areas that have already been worked on. I can switch to a black shade to remove imperfections, for example, from the eyebrows. From the eyes. You can see from the mask that I've avoided the eyebrows and I've avoided the eyes. I'm going to make this layer more transparent so we don't have too orange skin. I'm showing you how it is. It's very pretty. Let's go to the next photo. I'm not going to add tan on these lips because the skin in this photo is tan enough as it is. That's what I was talking about. You don't have to apply all of your knowledge to all of your photos. The best is the enemy of the good. Let's move on to the next photos and work through the algorithm that we already know.
Oh, I should know. It hits me like a tidal wave. Every time you say my name, it hits me like a tidal wave. It hits me like a tidal wave.
Let's move on to the last photo, and here too I decided not to do a tan. It's a very warm skin and I think this photo should be a little bit cooler. So, today you learned how to make skin even more beautiful after frequency separation. In fact, these are the most important lessons on how to make perfect skin in photos. I hope this lesson was useful and understandable. And very soon we will learn some more details for retouching our photos. I already feel like congratulating everyone who has watched this lesson. Because at this point, everyone who has already seen it can make a cool photo, and I congratulate you on that. I wish you a good mood and I'll see you in the new lesson. Welcome to the last lesson of the basic course. Today we're going to learn the remaining features needed for basic photo retouching. Get absolutely all the knowledge that will help you make beautiful photos for your pages or for your clients if you're future retouchers. Today we're going to break down background blurring, cropping, color correction, and sharpening. This is what I always end my photo work with. So, let's get started. I'd like to start with the background. In this photo, I don't have a background. So let's open up this photo. New layer. Merge all the layers together like we normally do. I can't say that the background here is totally unfortunate or bad. Maybe you want to make it a little bit more blurry, a little bit smoother. Do a gradient. Let's try this. Let's take the mixer brush tool. I can mix a white and a darker shade. It's very important not to touch your face at this point. You have to work carefully. So far, I'm getting good results. But I don't like the juxtaposition between the white and the pink. You have to control it so you don't smudge the lashes. I'm zooming in on the photo to see how it looks. Now I can smudge the face a little bit to show how I'm going to tackle this problem next. As we know, you can make a mask. Let's take a brush. A white mask. Black brush. Opacity 70 and 100. I paint exactly on the client's skin to remove the areas where the blur got hit. Now everything looks nice and neat. I make a few more minor adjustments. I don't like the way it looks next to the hair. You can also use a brush with color if you want. For example, I have a dark brush. You can darken this area. I'm also going to try to make this area a little bit darker. The same way works with light. And any other color. The main thing here is not to overdo it, because on a normal layer, the brush just draws and paints everything on the layer. Besides, if, for example, I'm annoyed by the pink tint of the napkin, I can neutralize it. Let's do the hue. Saturation. We take a dropper and look for color. In lesson 2, we did this with red and yellow. The program thinks it's magenta. I can neutralize it completely. I can make it a different color. I'll make it green for a change. Since magenta also glows on the eyes, I'll take a black brush and remove the green where it's not needed. Now let's make the brush a little bit more transparent, like 39. And try to smooth out this whole transition. Now I've got a little bit of pink and a little bit of green. This is a triple gradient. I didn't plan it this way, but why not? I don't always do it. But if you're interested in this theme, you can experiment. Okay, in the next picture, we have a little background too. I don't want to paint over it. I want to blur it a little bit. And we're going to use a different technique. I have this action. And now I'm going to teach you how to do it. You can create your own action if you like the effect. To do that, we're going to create a new layer by combining all of our layers. When we've created the layer, let's go to Filter. Blur. Gaussian Blur. And look at the photo. I chose a default high value so that it would fit all the photos, that way it would be easier for me to adjust the opacity of the layer later. For example, 56. Add a mask. Invert it in black. Take a white brush and paint where you want to blur the background. My brush gets on the skin. I'll clean that up later with a black brush. Sometimes it's easier to do that than to carefully draw lines. Now I'm going to take a black brush with an opacity of about 70-100. And we'll remove all the excess. Now I don't really like it too blurry. It depends on your taste. I like a more natural effect, like a macro shot. That's how I like it. If I wanted to do something else, I would use a color brush. Or mixed brush tool. Like this. Done. Here's the background so you don't have to change anything. I can make the darker. I created a new layer and I'll just take a brush, take a dropper, define the color. It's pure black, distance the photo and draw. That's it. I just made the background of our photo cleaner. That's it. It's beautiful. What do we do next? I sharpen. I always create a new layer for that. And on some photos I sharpen in detail, point by point, and on some photos I sharpen the entire photo. We're going to learn both of these methods in a moment. Here, I'm going to add sharpening to the entire photo. I have an action for that too, we'll do it together in the next photo. In this photo, we'll just see. So, I've merged all the layers into a new layer. I go in. Filter. Other. High pass. The photo becomes gray, and I start looking for a value at which the color in the photo will show up a bit. It's like this. Soft light. The photo immediately became sharp. Texture appeared. Skin. More hairs appeared. I usually never leave this value and always make this layer more transparent, like 50. Show before after. Before after. I really like it this way. Also, if you don't like a lot of sharpening on an area, we can create a mask and brush away what we don't want. Let's move on to the next photo. In this photo, I would sharpen only in the details. I'm merging all the layers into a new one. You can do the same as in the previous photo, and then create a black mask and use a white brush to draw sharpen where you want it. I do it even simpler. The sharpness tool. I have an intensity of 50%. You can set it less, because 50 is sometimes a lot. But I'm fine with that. I'd rather do a more transparent layer later. In this photo, I want to highlight just the eyelashes and the eyeliner. I paint over the areas I want to highlight. A lot of clients like to see pixels and ask me to highlight them. And I do it, of course, because it's not hard to do. I show before and after. Before and after. I got such a wet skin effect, beautiful and expensive. It's important to work carefully and not to overdo it. Let's move on to the next picture. Here I would add sharpening completely, because it's not enough for me. It's probably also because the photo was taken in macro and it's very blurry. Now we're going to do an action. The usual way. Add action. Sharpness. So the first thing I do is I merge all my layers into a new layer. Sharpen. Filter. Other. High pass. The photo turns gray, and I start looking for a value at which the photo shows a little bit of color. I think it's somewhere around 21. It all depends on the quality of the photo. Some photos already at 5% start to show a hue, but that means it's low quality, most likely. Okay. Soft light. I add a white mask to the layer so that if I need to use a black brush to just remove that harshness in some area. Save the action. Making the layer more transparent. 46. And I'm fine with that. I like it. If I, for example, still want to add sharpening on a separate zone, I can do it with the sharpening tool. On the photo, eyelashes became more noticeable. I'm happy with the result. Also, please note, remember how we did with the action frequency separation. It's the same with sharpness. High pass will be different on every photo. So we open up the sharpness action. Look for the high pass step, and check the box on the left. And now every time we apply this operation, Photoshop will ask what percentage of high pass we want to use. Let's move on to the next image. This is where we're going to try to apply the action. So, we're going to apply our action. The program will ask us to enter a percentage. I'm going to choose 19. That's good. It's more transparent. Yeah, I always choose a transparency of about 50%. I don't like over-sharpened photos, it's not always appropriate. Like in this case, when I want to locally to sharpen the mask. Black brush opacity of 70 and 100 is fine with me. I wanted to sharpen the lips. Because I like the lips to look softer. You can do this in any way you like. In the course, I show you how I do it and how I like it, but everyone chooses the style they prefer. Next I'm going to sharpen the other two photos.
I can't sleep, yeah. Only miss you when I'm breathing in too deep, yeah. Am I just your little secret? I didn't hear the sirens. I didn't wanna see the warning.
So, our next step is color correction. Usually all clients want all of their photos to be about the same color. I, as a retoucher, also like to have all my photos always the same color. And it often happens that, my customer likes cooler photos, I make him. And for my page, if I want to make a post with this photo, I make a warmer one. I like skin color like in this photo. That's also a matter of taste. But I'm going to show you now how to make a certain number of photos about the same color. To do that, we combine everything back into one layer. Camera Raw Filter. In fact, every craftsman or retoucher can make a preset for himself and use it. So, like we did with the redness. I don't use presets, because I'm a retoucher and every time my customers send me photos under totally different light and a preset doesn't make sense. But I do have favorite settings that I apply. For example, if you're learning retouching just for yourself, knowing that you have all your photos, always taken under the same lighting, maybe for you preset is perfect. So, let me show you what I do. Like I said, this kind of color correction is perfect for me. I might add a little bit of temperature, a little bit of tint, take away the exposure a little bit, and add a little bit of whites. Yeah, like that. Like, I can still add a little bit of texture, use a little bit of clarity. Okay, I've saved it, I like this picture. I'm gonna make this layer a little bit more transparent. That's what I always create new layers for. To make it more transparent and not be afraid that I'll make some of my other actions more transparent. I don't like that the lips have changed color, so I create a white mask, black brush 80 and 100. Paint over the lips and remove the unwanted tint. You can also use an eraser at this point, but I don't recommend it. Because it only works one way and you can't get something back, unlike the mask. So, when this photo is ready, I'll try to do abduction tint on the rest of the photos. In order not to switch to a photo several times, I save the photo. Now I will tell you about the peculiarities of saving photos. In the process of processing, when I work with a customer, I often save photos in the Photoshop mode. If you save in the Photoshop mode, you can at any time return to this photo and continue retouching. Then absolutely all layers and actions are saved. This format is not suitable for social networks. It is only for work. For example, if you need to pause in your work. For this we have File, Save As. I create a new folder. The program offers me the format Photoshop. And then we have a photo saved in PSD format. And if I reopen the photo, I have absolutely all the layers open. I will demonstrate it now. I close this photo, I find the folder, I open it, I transfer it to the program. And there it is. I have absolutely everything open again, just as it was. I'm not going to use it now. I'm going to save the photo as if I were giving it to a customer. I found a quick way for me that doesn't lose quality and the color stays exactly the same when used on social media. That's the most important thing to us. So, I click Export and I set myself up with a quick JPG export. In keyboard shortcuts, I chose to use the function keys. You can do the same thing. And I just click on that. Looking for a folder. Opening the photo and I keep it and I'm going to look at the rest of my photos. Now I'm comparing the skin color to this photo. This photo I'd like to make it a little lighter and a little pinker. To do this I create a new layer as usual and go into Camera Raw filter. Make our photo a little pinker. Add a little exposure. Adding a little bit of whites. Maybe make it a little bit cooler. I'll take away the pink a little bit. Add a little bit of texture, a little bit of clarity. And now I'm going to open the photo again and compare them. It's like this, for example. And I like it, it works for me. Okay. Cool. And I'm gonna save that photo, too. I create a new layer and go into Camera Raw filter. And now we see what we are missing or what we have too much of. You can also try to work with color mixing. For example, we take orange. We see that our photo is orange. We go into brightness and slightly remove this orange shade. Okay. I open up the swatch and see what I'm missing. It's still orange, I'm making it lighter. Let's see. I go back to the basic settings, make the photo pinker. I'm not going to add texture here, because it's sharper than the rest of the photo, and I'm not going to add clarity either. I'm going back to color mixing, because I see that something else is wrong here. Maybe the red needs to be more saturated, maybe the magenta. It's already starting to be more similar. Of course, it's very difficult to make photos of different masters in exactly the same color tone. But we make the most of it. There's a lot of adjustments and instruments. You'll need time to master and try everything, but it doesn't compare to any mobile app. Now I'm going to show another way we can work with multiple photos, if it's not convenient to open a sample the way I do. I'm happy with this photo. By the way, here we can click on this square to see how it was, how it became. The photo was very orange. Now it's cool. This is also how you can see the before and after. Okay. Now we're going to compare how it was before retouching and how it is now. I really like it. In this photo, I'm not going to use a mask to remove the color from the lips because I think that's how it was in its original form. And the way it looked in the photo is just the effect of the fact that it was very much a yellow photo. So I'm going to leave it as it is, but that's my personal decision. I open the next photo. Now I'm going to show the way I promised. Window. Arrange. And choose how the program shows our photos. For example, 4 photos will show us and we'll see them by color. I usually open 2 because more is not very convenient. So we do 2 vertically. And just on the right is the sample, and we're working with the left photo that we want to adjust to it. Created a new layer. You see, it's not very convenient to adjust in this case. I can still try this way, but it's not very convenient either. That's why I like the first way better. Here you can adjust the temperature a little bit. Add, for example, pink and exposure a little less. White, I add a little bit. Texture, clarity. Looking at our photos. The photo with the lips seems more juicy. For this I can add vibrance and saturation. This photo lacked a little bit of saturation. Add a little bit more pink. I can see already that the photos are very similar. Take the temperature down a little bit more. Here we go. That's how I like it. When I have 2 photos side by side, I can see what I don't like and what I like. Now I can see that this photo is definitely lighter. I open the filter again and add exposure. I'll add temperature again. Okay, I like it much better this way. This photo looks darker due to the fact that there is a shadow. But they are about in the same color range now. I'm looking at our before-afters and it looks cool. I'll be going back to the window. Arrange. Consolidate all to tabs. Because it was uncomfortable for me. I'm looking at pictures we haven't taken yet. By the way, I recommend on photos to remove color correction from the eyes as much as the lips. Especially if the change was significant. So I'm going to do a mask and remove filters here as well. And I'll continue with the others. I suggest you watch it in a more accelerated mode.
I can't sleep, yeah. Only miss you when I'm breathing in too deep, yeah. Am I just your little secret? I didn't hear the sirens. I didn't wanna see the warning signs, and now I pay the price, yeah.
So, is that really it? Checking all of our photos. The last step is to crop the photo. Of course, if you are a master who processes photos for yourself, You can do it at the beginning, in order not to retouch the whole photo. Since I am a retoucher, I try to leave it to the last stage or not to do framing at all. Due to the fact that it often happens that the retoucher has his own vision and there are customers who ask to do as the retoucher sees beautiful. But there are also customers who would like to get their photo in one piece. That's why I recommend retouchers to process a whole photo. Save it in PSD and then crop and save it in JPG. For masters it may be useful too, because the same photo can be used in several different angles. Also, if later you will create collages, it is also very convenient when the photo is whole. So, the standard method of cropping this is the crop tool. I always have it on a 6:7 setting. I really like this format because it fits perfectly into the frame on Instagram. Okay, there's a square. But I don't like it. It feels old-fashioned to me. So, our photos. Here, of course, I would cut off a little bit of excess and leave our lips like this. Here I probably wouldn't crop the photo at all. But for the course, let's try. You can leave the whole face the same way and crop a little bit. You can leave, for example, one eye, and that would look nice too. I think I probably wouldn't do that, because after all, I've done the work on 2 eyes, and I would leave it. It is also interesting that, for example, if you want to rotate a photo, you can do it with the crop tool. If, for example, you want to stretch the photo some more but it is too cropped, we can click the Content Aware button and the program will try to find a good way to replace those places. Let's give it a try. The bottom part is fine. But the top part is not perfect. But that can be fixed with a patch, for example. I'll take it. A little movement. That's it. The photo looks cool. The only problem is that once the photo is cropped, the original is no longer visible in its original form. I'm undoing it because I don't need it. It's just a demonstration of how I can modify and crop photos. The same goes for this photo. I would remove the nostrils and the background we removed and leave just the lips because I love close-up photos. Photos like this are also clear. We can zoom in, we can leave it. We can make the eyebrows barely visible. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. We're not going to go into more detail about learning how to crop because everything is logical here and it's a matter of taste. So our basic course has come to an end. I congratulate my students on that. It's a very cool course that will give you so many opportunities and work on your own photos and someone else's photos, if you want to become a retoucher. I think it's a cool start. It's a very cool, interesting job and profession. A very cool program in which you can develop, in which you can constantly learn and improve your photos, which is important. Because it will come in handy not only in the professional sphere, but in life too. I wish good luck to everyone who finished the course, and I can't wait to see your workouts. Good luck to everyone. I love you all. And I'll see you in the next lesson with those who have Course Pro. Hi everyone, with today's lesson we are starting the advanced part of the course. And today we're going to have a lesson on retouching portraits. I think this is a very interesting new knowledge because some people often have difficulties with portraits. And I searched a lot for myself different points, how to do it more conveniently, more beautifully, more easily. And I developed my algorithm. And today I will teach it to you on the basis of the knowledge gained in the lessons of the basic course. Retouching a portrait, like any other photo, I start with the first action. The beginning, the redness. In this photo, it doesn't feel like we have too much redness. But I can definitely see that there are red eyebrows here. I purposely chose non-standard portraits because, for example, this portrait is a bit low quality, and the second portrait would have been quite difficult to do because of the very strong redness. It would be unfair to take 2 easy photos for an advanced course, because I want everyone who watches this class to be able to do everything that I can do. And after this course, even the most difficult photos will seem easy. So, redness. I make a smaller brush, make opacity 40 and 100 and paint on the eyebrows, because I can already see that the redness there is clearly unnecessary. It's very important not to touch the purple tint. So that's where I'm going to end it. I'm going to create a new layer, and this is going to be a cleaning. I'm going to show first one photo completely, and then the second one to make it easier to understand. Especially since they will be drastically different. On the cleaning, I will use all the same 3 of our magic instruments. And the first thing I notice is the hairs. I'd like to remove them. If I see that they're not removed very evenly, I just take a mixer brush and smooth out the background. Because my background allows it. Here, if you have your monitor set up well, you can see these streaks. And you can see from them that the quality of the photo has suffered a little bit. But my goal is to get the most out of any photo. So I use our basic tools to further clean the photo. So we're done cleaning. Now I'd like to clean up my eyes a little bit. I just cleaned up the blood vessels on the whites. They're not very red. So I just make a copy of the cleaning layer. I take a mixer brush and I blend. I try not to smudge the colors too much, if there's shadows, for example. And I make this layer a little bit more transparent so it doesn't look blurry. A new layer. Liquefy. I'm not going to change the work of the master on this photo. When retouching a portrait, there is a panel like this, which also makes it easier for us to work. If I see that I want to make the right eye a little bit bigger, I can do it. I can make the nose smaller, but I'm not going to do that because it's beautiful. I can add a little smile to the girl. It'll make her look cuter. I can use the pucker tool. And I'm going to go over the lips so that the lips are a little bit more defined. Now I'm going to do a little bit of shaping. It's not necessary, it's my preference. I'm just showing you the technique. I like everything else. Okay. The next step is frequency separation. You already know all the basics of this method because we've had a whole lesson. But I want to show you some of the tricks that I put in there. I specifically saved this information for the pro course, to speed up and improve your work even more. Now we're not going to use the previous action. Because we're going to need to modify it a little bit. So you can watch what I'm doing right now and create a new action for yourself. This is the action that you're going to be using most often, so try to do it carefully. So we merge all the layers, everything as usual. Sign the layer color. Make a copy of the layer. Sign it as texture. Make the texture layer invisible. The color layer. Open the filter. Blur. Gaussian blur. Choose a value that blurs the hairs. Since the photo is not very high quality, the value will be low. I can see that the eyelashes are blurred. 9 and 1. I leave it that way. Go to the layer with the texture and make it visible. Image. Apply image. Layer color. The channel is RGB. Blending. Subtract. Opacity 100. Scale 2. Offset 128. OK. Linear light. Make a copy of this layer. Press Option or Alt and attach the top layer to the bottom layer. Normal mode. Make a copy of the color layer. So, that's usually the end of this action, but I recommend now adding new things that help me accelerate even more. In this same action, I add dodge and burn to myself right away. Transparent layer. Soft light. It's always in between the color layers and the texture layers. That's not all. I go back to the color copy layer. And here I apply my tanning action. Note that the tan action should preferably not be applied next to a transparent layer because the program will apply it as a mask. So I went back to the color layer. We go back to the copy color layer again. We select the mixer brush tool and now we turn off the action. Don't forget to uncheck Gaussian blur in the action step list. Here we go. In portraits, I always follow the rule of working from light to dark shades. I always mix shades carefully. In order not to go over the eyes, eyebrows, nose. As you can notice, we have chosen the blur radius very well. The work turns out to be as soft as possible. There is no plastic effect, and everything turns out not blurred. We didn't remove any wrinkles under the eyes so that the work doesn't look plastic. That's the same reason I leave all the shadows that we have in the photo. I don't remove them, I try not to blur it too much. It has to be neat and natural. After I'm done with this, I can go to the texture copy layer, and I'm going to remove this spot here, because I don't like it. Let's leave it like this. I really like it. Looking at the before-after. It turned out really cool. After that, I do a tan right away. I do a 15 and 100 brush and I paint over the face. It's so neat. Watching the before and after. It's a great result. After that I go to dodge and burn. I take a light brush. I leave opacity 15. I draw a triangle under the eyes. It is not necessary to make circles like a panda. Triangle looks more natural and we observe the shadow of the face. And here it's exactly the same. Here we have a shadow. I highlight the back of the nose, the area under the eyebrow. A little bit of the bridge of the nose and the forehead. Above the lip and the chin. I'm going to make this layer a little bit more transparent, so that's fine with me. Now I'm going to switch to a darker shade. I'm doing an opacity of 10. I'm going to darken the shadows on the face. I'm going to switch back to white. Opacity 30. I lighten the whites of the eyes. I lighten our eyes. I take a black brush and do a little bit around the pupil and around the lashes. Another way to make the eyes more saturated, I select the curves mask, detach it from the layer. I look at the eyes and adjust the curve. Like this. Okay. I create a mask for this layer. Invert. I take a white brush. Opacity 70 and I paint on the mask in the eye area. So I got them bright and beautiful. In better quality photos it will be even cooler and even more noticeable. With a black brush I remove under the eye. So, I go back to the layer with dodge and burn, make it more transparent. Let's see the changes. Yeah, there are some nice shadows in our photo. It's more interesting looking. So, I'm now going to make a new layer that combines all the layers. I don't want to work with the background here and I won't. I would do a color correction on this photo. I open the raw camera filter. I make the photo a little bit warmer, a little bit pinker. I turn down the exposure a little bit and add whites. I add a little bit of texture here, a little bit of clarity. And I'm happy with that correction. Now I'm going to add a little more sharpness. We're doing this with the action from last week's tutorial. I'm looking for a value where the color starts to be visible. Like 8 and 9. Okay. So, I'm going to make this layer more transparent. And this is how I'm leaving this picture because later on we're going to go through a lesson with skin texture to come back to it. I want to make a really nice collage out of it later on. But at this point, I'm done with this photo, and we'll move on to the next more difficult photo. So, traditionally, we'll start with the redness action. I'm using a white brush. I'm currently at an opacity of 70. I think a dense brush like this is appropriate now. This is probably the one case where our preset won't do it. Only the preset can't handle that much redness. I went all over the face. It's a funny mask. Here's a before and after. Well, of course, the changes are very noticeable, but that's not enough. I'm going to create the next layer. Camera raw filter. Let's try to work with color mixing. I reduce the saturation of red and magenta. I make the red more orange. In the basic settings, I lower the temperature and make the photo a little greener. Okay. I save it. I'm going to create a mask here, because I don't want to apply these settings to the whole image. I'm going to invert the mask. Go over it with a white brush. I'm not painting over the eyebrows, just the red skin tones. I make it a little more transparent. I create a new layer and do a cleaning. So, the most difficult stage is over. I hate cleaning the photos the most because this stage can't be sped up. Our next step is already liquefy. I'm combining all the layers into one. And here we go. Now, as in the previous portrait, we do frequency separation. Hopefully you've successfully created the action. Apply it. Looking at how we're going to blur the photo. In portraits, the radius is always smaller. I want the texture to smooth out some of the pores a little bit. I probably choose 9 and 3. I take a mixer brush and work through all areas of the photo from light to dark. Fully evaluate this layer, make it transparent. 62%. I see small spots on the bridge of her nose, so in order to remove them I go to the texture copy layer and carefully remove them. Here it is important not to overdo it, because the girl has freckles and I don't want to remove them. Here we remove the tendrils. I will now take the sharpening tool. I'm going to add a little bit of texture. I don't want to completely erase the spots, I don't have that task. I can see that I didn't cleaning the whites of the eyes in the previous steps. So I'm on the texture copy layer growing this with a mixer brush. See before and after. Now I can see that I still have a little pink tint on the face and a few spots that didn't get removed. I'll have to do another frequency separation. Since we have programmed Photoshop to do action with a lot of layers, it won't be able to do another action because the layer names will be repeated in this case. I tell you what we should do. I press Command or Control and select all 6 layers from the action. Right-click. Merge layers. Give it a name. Now all 6 layers of our action are one layer. Create a new layer. Camera Raw Filter. And play with the settings to improve the color of the face and completely remove the redness. I created a mask. I'm inverting it. I'm using a white brush. And I go over the skin, the eyebrows, the nose, completely removing the ugly tint from the skin. Now, the skin is quite white. But it's not as much of a problem as it was in the beginning. Some customers would already be satisfied with this option, because the photo looks much better. But we will try to make it even better. You should realize that yes, this is a hard photo and there won't be many of them. But through such photos imagination and wit are developed. And solutions can be found in the retouching process. We're back with our new action with frequency separation. Only now I will make a little bit smaller radius to smooth out the imperfections. On the eyebrow you can see the hairs. So let's leave it like that. We take the mixer brush and carefully make a blending where we need it. For example, above the lip. See the difference? There is a difference, but in the next lessons we'll work on the texture. Now on the forehead. The colors are better. If I see that there are still some texture issues, I can still smooth the texture a little bit in those areas. Then I'll add sharpening and everything will be beautiful. But right now it's important for me to get the spots out. I try not to remove the texture at all, but sometimes I have to. But we're talking about difficult photos now. I'm looking at all the changes. I'm making this layer a little bit more transparent. I'm going to remove the texture under the eyebrow a little bit more. Done. Now we're going to add a classic tan to the photo. I'm doing a 15 brush. And paint. I first filled in the forehead and then move on to the nose area. I remind you that we try to make the tan evenly. I reduce the brush, I paint on the chin. Under the eyebrows I will not add a shade. I make the layer a little bit more transparent. 74, but I see that the chin is very yellow. So I'm just going to paint a little bit with a black brush on the mask here. It still left a yellow color. But now we're going to fix that in dodge and burn. I restore the palette values to black and white. Taking white and drawing highlights. Bridge of the nose and nose. Forehead. Above the eyebrow. Already glowing skin. I draw triangles under the eyes. Chin. This layer I'll make more transparent when I'm done. Take a black brush. Do a little blush and contouring. I add a little color to the eyebrows. Next, I take a white brush, opacity 30. I'm going to work on the eyes. We're also going to add some darker colors. Make this layer a little bit more transparent. I want to add some brightness to the eyes. Add a curve mask and adjust the curve. Invert the mask. White brush. Opacity 60. Paint. Looks cool to me. I study the photo completely to see if everything is okay. Combining all the layers. I want to add a couch over her head. I select the spot where the couch is missing using the lasso tool. Fill. Content aware. It's perfect. I take the mixer brush. I make this spot more blurry. It's exactly the same here. I can also take a brush. Soft light. Opacity 30. Fill the background with black. I think I've made it too dark. So I'll make this layer more transparent. But I didn't take into account that all my actions will become transparent. So I'll create a new layer and do the same thing. Lasso. Fill. Content aware. Alright. We're creating a new layer so we don't make any more mistakes. And I'm going back into the camera raw filter. Let's make the photo less white. This photo is the most global change in this course. I think we're going to add a little bit more sharpening. And I saw that here I have some pretty dark area. I can take the soft light mode. I take a lighter shade and lighten this area. Now we can add sharpening. We turn on action. I'm going to go with a 14 radius. And I'm going to make this layer more transparent, 16. Yeah, there are times when a small percentage like that can make all the difference. I think we've done an amazing job. I congratulate you on your new knowledge and wish you easy portrait retouching. Have a good mood. Hi. So now we're going to start our lesson on creating texture on skin. We'll be able to add texture where we're missing it. This is very interesting to me. It was once a novelty and a revelation when this topic came up because very sometimes it's missing. There are sometimes photos where you would really like to add texture. There are photos that have spots with no texture. Sometimes you want to add texture where we removed it, like removing tendrils or something like that. So today we will learn and create a new action. I have one for texture too. So let's start with this photo. We have to create a new layer, but we don't do it in our usual way by merging layers. We just create a new layer. And for this we need the keyboard shortcuts Shift plus Control or Command plus N. We'll name this layer Noise Texture. Soft Light Mode. Check the box at the bottom. OK. So when we've created this layer, we go to the Filter tab. Noise. Add noise. Now we choose a value at which the noise in the photo will roughly match the texture we want. For example, right now it's 54. If I go any higher, the texture gets too grainy. 58. Make it 58. That works for me right now. OK. Next, on the same layer. Filter. Blur. Gaussian blur. Usually the blur radius is very low. About 0 to 3, not too big. I'll go with 2 and 3. You need to make sure the noise looks soft, but it's noticeable. I add a mask to this layer. I invert it to black. I take a white brush. You need a more transparent brush for this. About 30. Later on I'll probably make this layer more transparent. Right now around the lips I'm painting texture. I don't paint on the lips because I like the texture of the lips, I just need to work the skin in a little bit. Usually in macro photos, the edges of the photo are out of focus. And I don't add texture there because it would look unnatural. I make this layer more transparent. I usually do this step before I add sharpening. Later sharpening further enhances the texture of the photo. Look at the before and after. A little bit of texture has appeared. So the photo starts to become more real. Let's try it on another photo. For example, this photo has a texture problem on the forehead. Let's create an action for the texture. We'll add an action as usual. Texture noise. Soft light. Fill with soft light. OK. Filter. Noise. Add noise. Looking at the photo and picking a value. A high enough value of 153. I think it would look good here. Filter. Blur. Gaussian blur. There is no single value for all photos. And not all photos need this. But this method often helps me out a lot. Don't worry if you don't understand something right now. You just need to do it a few times. We're going to go through more photos now to make it more clear. I'm creating a mask. I invert it to black. And I apply the brush tool. Action is over. And now, as usual, open the action and mark steps with Gaussian blur and add noise. So I zoom in on the photo. I clearly know where I'm missing texture. So I'm not going to paint all over the photo but only where I need it. Like here. Above the eyebrow. Here too. Here. And here. So I'm just filling in the areas in the photo where we don't have much texture. Of course, you can't completely smudge the skin texture and add it this way. Because it would look terrible. Of course, this way is to simulate texture for small areas. I look at the before and after. The skin looks great. Let's move on to the next photo. It's pretty textural, so I'm not going to add anything here. I think professionalism in Photoshop is when you don't apply everything you know to every photo, but only where it's needed. So we move on to the next photo. Here we have the same portrait that we processed in the last lesson. And it's the one that's definitely lacking texture. And now we're going to do it. We're going to add an action. Because of the low quality of the photo here, the noise value is going to be much lower. Like 28. Blur 2 and 4. I'm going to take a white brush and I'm going to add a little bit of noise. And so the skin stops being washed out. Here I use a fairly large brush because I need to fill in a large area of the photo. Watch. After making the layer more transparent. Now we have the texture. Notice that I purposely don't make the texture too prominent. It has to be in moderation. The best retouch is the one that can't be seen. It is best for clients of permanent makeup artists to assume that the photo is natural. Artificial photos inspire doubt. Let's move on to the next photo. I remember this photo was lacking texture. I think it was under the eyebrow here. Over the lip here. Maybe some people would like to blur this photo more, take away the extra texture that I've already added, but that's a matter of taste. So, let's apply our action. Let's look at the texture. 51. The blur here is bigger. Like 2 and 8. I'm looking to make it look nice when I add the blur. I mean, it's clear that anyone who's doing this now and watching this course can see that if you look closely, you can see that the noise that adds a little bit of a different shade. But in fact, when we save the photo, it all looks like just added texture. And it looks better than if we didn't have any texture there. When the photo is a little bit lower quality, it shows these red and green tones than when we add the texture. But when I make the layer more transparent, it won't be noticeable. I add more texture where it's missing. Done. I leave this photo and add texture to the rest of the photos. So, we've added texture to all of the photos. This is the end of our lesson on texture. I recommend that you try to use it, because I know very well that for many students this lesson is not always immediately understandable, but it is a very interesting tool. You want and need to use it. When you start to understand this feature and when you have tried it on problematic photos that really need culture added, the most important thing, it's not to overdo the noise. Because if the noise percentage is higher than it needs to be, it can look like a low-quality photo. So try to be careful with this feature. I wish you a good workout. See you in the next lesson. Hi. So, today we're going to learn how to draw artificial eyebrows and eyelashes so that it looks as natural as possible. Often there are photos where this is sorely lacking. Or, for example, the absence of an eyelash really spoils the look. What do we do for this? We create a transparent layer. Eyelashes. We need the brush settings. I talked about this in the very first tutorial. If you don't have this panel, add it in the Window tab. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brush and make it less transparent. Like 83 and 100. I determine what color I want the lashes to be because they're not always black. Sometimes they're brown, gray. I take a color. That's the black shade I got. We don't change anything else. Normal mode. We adjust the diameter of the brush to the thickness of the lashes. We'll understand it later on in the process, if we need to increase or decrease the brush. So, brush settings. Shape dynamics. Fade. Normally this function is turned off, but now we turn it on. And we can see that now the brush is not infinite. Pay attention to the fact that when you have finished working with eyelashes, you need to turn off this function again, so that it does not interfere with the work. If you do not do this, the brush will not work correctly and make short strokes. Then on the right side there is a number. Now I have 25. It is not the default number. It is the length of the brush stroke and we choose it each time under the photo. Now we're going to try it. 25 is too short for us. We'll try, like, 150. No. That's too long. I'll make it 120. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get the length right, but it's worth it. This is how I can draw the lashes now. I'm going to show you on clean skin. I just take it and draw with a sharp stroke. I get beautiful lashes that are naturally tapered. I think I need to reduce the diameter of the brush, like 8. And let's try this. In this photo the girl has beautiful eyelashes. But we can add a little bit. Be sure to add them also with a beautiful curve in order that they do not look flat and not natural. It is desirable that they crossed a little bit between themselves in order that it looked real. The main thing is not to overdo it. I draw chaotically eyelashes that more or less was similar to the real ones. As we move along the length of our eye, you need to change the length of the eyelashes a little bit, that it was like the real ones. Here I will add a few thin eyelashes. For this I will make the length of 70 and the diameter of the brush 6. Adding eyelashes is definitely an artistic process, which can be practiced for a very long time. Of course, I do not always do it. Here is very important request of my client. Also I can add a little lower. I'll make it 160. And a little bit thinner. Like 3. Because the lower lashes are thinner. And as we can see, they're not as bright black. And we'll pick up the shade as well. Try a little bit of drawing. I don't really like it. I'll probably go a little bit darker. It won't be black, but it'll be a more appropriate shade. I'm going to draw the eyelashes sloppily. Of course, they should not be the same length, because it will not look natural. I zoom in on the photo to see how it looks. Here's a before and after. Usually, when I have completely painted the eyelashes, I make this layer a little bit more transparent so that the result is not too bright. But I also pay attention not to be too transparent, so that it doesn't look fake. For example, 80 would look much better. And now I will show the best. Take the rectangular marquee tool and select our eye completely. Copy that area. Command or Control plus C. I press Command or Control plus C to deselect it. And now we paste the copied area. Command or Ctrl plus V. Now I need to select the area with the eyelashes. Command or Control plus T. Right click on the image. Flip horizontal. And now the eyelashes are flipped the other way. And now I'm going to move it to the right eye area. I'm trying to find the perfect size and angle. You can also use the eraser to remove some of the eyelashes. Some of them will have to be drawn evenly, but now I'm going to try to pick up as much as possible so that it looks harmonious. And for this we can right-click on the photo again and select Warp. This grid opens up and we can stretch our picture in different places. I'm trying to adjust it. Oh, that's great. And I'm just going to take an eraser and erase what I don't want. I'm also going to make sure that what I've drawn is transparent. It's far away, it shouldn't stand out so much. So I'm going to make it not transparent at 70. I'm going to take the eraser and I'm going to remove everything that's unnecessary. So when I've cleaned up all the excess, I can take a little bit more to paint a few lashes. I go back to the brush settings. Try 80. And I paint just a little bit more. That's how cool our eyelashes are. Now I want to show in this picture. Here it's going to be very visual, because there's really not enough eyelashes, especially on the left eye. I've created a new layer. I'm doing brush settings. This photo is not as high quality as the previous photo. So I think the length of the stroke will be about 45. The brush diameter is 3. On the palette choose a dark shade. Let's try from here to draw small bundles, gradually reducing the brush. Do the same work now in this photo. Very cool eyelash accent in this photo. I'm very happy with it. That's the cool effect of painted eyelashes. Of course, it's not necessary, but it's cool that we can do it. So, next photo. In this photo, I'd like to show how I can also add hairs to the eyebrow where you can see that there is clearly a piece I'd like to add in. I again choose the darkest shade that I have on my eyebrows. Brush settings. Try 200 and do a size 6. It's very important to paint chaotically. Even sometimes I draw from one hair another hair. It is desirable to respect the direction given by the original hairs. I believe that now it is as natural as possible. Our task is to make it beautiful and unnoticeable, just to improve the photo. It's very good. I'm going to make it a little bit more transparent. And so the drawn hairs completely blend in with the eyebrow that's in our photo. Anyway, it's such a cool technique. Use it. It's very important that you don't abuse it. However, it is fun to use, though. Try it out. I hope it all works out. Share your results. Hi everyone. Today we finally got to a long-awaited lesson about collages. I know there are plenty of specialists who adore working on collages, and those eager to learn creating collages as well. Therefore, let's start with the simple, so we gradually move on to the complicated. As a matter of fact, creating collages is quite a simple task. The crucial point here is memorizing, or better, note-taking of the whole process for stages, and later on, with enough practice, you will no longer find collage creation extremely challenging. So, when you have edited a photo, you always create a new layer to create a collage. Now I press Command or Control plus A, I have selected the whole picture. After that I press Command or Control plus C, copy, and I further cancel my selection with Command or Control plus C. And so, this way the photo I've just copied got to my clipboard. Now I press Command or Control plus V and as you see here a new layer appeared, with pasting the same image. Use the Move tool and I can move this photo. I can select it with Command or Control plus T. You see, a blue frame appears. And now I can rotate the photo. There is also an arrow so, I can zoom in and out of the photo. And position it the way I want. I'd like to create a rather simple but at the same time, quite an elegant collage. Hence, with this goal in mind, here's how I get our cute lil eye placed right here, exactly this way, thus allowing me to keep an area in here. I bet now it all seems complex to you, but no worries. We're about to deal with a matter of area fill up, and above all, we'll focus on our main task with this absolutely tool-free. I'm taking lasso tool for that, and just like that I'm selecting an area where it seems like the skin image isn't dense enough, choosing fill. Content aware. Okay, and so, that's how I end up having it all much more prettier here. Now we're gonna work with another area here, fill. Content aware. Okay. Eventually, we get a pretty cute image. It feels quite natural, as if never gone through any cutting. This feature enhances numerous issues being ironed out on the spot. Actually, that's what I had long been working my way up to before developing competency. Quite often, as we can see now, right here, other areas may also lack some skin for collage creating. In such case, too, I tend to fall back on the old tried and true. Fill. Content aware. Consequently, I come up with a collage showing a fully structured skin line, for I'm going to add up another eye in here. Now, say you're into pasting an image, but still in doubts as to the best way to handle it, then I advise doing it by Command or Control+V key shortcut. And how come it's an option? Well, the trick is in our photo still remaining in the clipboard since earlier we got it copied, saved, there, see, here it goes, so we then just hit Command or Control+T, which allows me to keep editing my photo. Alright, now I feel like adding another photo, hence, I go here, the spot my other photo is stored, then, creating a new layer here as well, for I'm pretty sure the current one has been already edited. Next, I hit Command or Control+A, Command or Control+C, and Command or Control+C to undo. After that, locating the other photo of mine, hit Command or Control+V, and as a result, I'm now getting the latest photo appear up here. So, once again, if we aim at pasting two different photos, first we undo this one for I no longer need it, especially in the event of side-by-side windows where you have both these photos located correspondingly, and if we intend to paste a totally different image, that's when we go to the folder with this image and afterwards we move it either by dragging it or we may copy it same way as we've done earlier with our photo. So, at the end, I have the second photo dragged up here the same way. Hope so far this all doesn't sound too complicated for you guys. I enable the layer with the image I've just chosen, then once again hitting Command or Control+T, which allows me to rotate my photo spinning it the way I want. I guess it's like this. I'm going to look at it now. So, now we're going to work on our smooth transition. A lot of people who watch the course have probably already guessed what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a mask. I'm going to take a black brush. I'm going to make it bigger. I'm going to set the opacity to 80 and 100 inches. And I wipe on our mask our picture where I don't need it. Okay, I see now that the photo turned a bit bigger than needed. Looks like the merging somewhat spoiled the whole beauty. What I'm going to do now is applying a smaller size for this photo while the upper one I'd rather place a bit higher. To do this, I go back to the layer upon this photo displayed upside down, and now I'm free to change it the following way through Command or Control+T shortcut. I'm going back to the photo that's on the top layer. It's on the bottom of the photo. Now I'm going to enlarge it a little bit. I switch back to the mask, turn on the white brush and wipe a little. I like it here, but I don't like it here, so I'm going to use a black brush to blend both photos. I also have a piece here that's missing a photo. I'm switching from a mask to a photo. Let's fill in this space in a different way. Sometimes you can just take a mixed brush and blend what we have here in this way. That works really well too. Next, if I see that I have pores here, which I'm not very happy with, I just create a new layer, and just like last time, take a mixer brush to carefully go through here and here. It turns out, in the place where my two pictures merge, so, in fact, in this way we have quite a beautiful collage. Well, let's move on to the next photo. We're going to do the lips. Again, create a new layer, crop the photo 6 to 7, 6 by 7, in order that we have it clearly fit in Instagram. Let's try something interesting here. I really love lips, so I always love beautiful lip collages. Unfolding the lips. I put it up like this. I see that the corners of the photo also completely fill the canvas. I usually fix such small corners with the mixer brush. This way it fits here very well. It turned out great. Here, I think I may well need a skin as well, so I will use the lasso tool after all. It doesn't look very nice here, So now I'm going to smooth out this area with the mixer brush. I don't need texture here for collage, so it's okay if we smooth it out a bit. Done. Next, I paste the photo. Spinning the photo and fantasizing. As I see now, I didn't really need what I did before, but sometimes it's better to be reassured, because sometimes you start making a collage, and some madness starts. Only here you need to cleaning a bit. Brush mixer. Done. So, now I take the mask, take the black brush again and go through it carefully, in order to make the lips stand out, but at the same time there was no feeling, so to speak, of super clarity, so that still a little bit of skin remained, so that the result was a very beautiful collage. This is such a cute collage I got. I really love this kind of collages, and on top of that, my customers just love them. That's how it is. And now the last thing, we will make a collage with our girl. For this, as always, create a new layer. Select the photo, copy. Cancel the selection. Crop the photo for Instagram feed, and we will also try to do something interesting, for example. Flip our photo. Let it be like this. And also, before the layer with the top, that is, this photo. The first one you chose for the collage. I sometimes use a solid color mask. Like black, okay. And that's it, it's just there as a black background. Later I'll explain more why I did that. Next, I paste the same photo as in the previous collages. Turn our photo around a bit. We'll enlarge the photo a bit. Now we'll gradually adjust them to each other. Now, create a mask, and then I take a black brush and start painting. I went back to the photo, which we have upside down, in order to make it a little smaller. Now I do not quite like the result, which means I now want to make this second photo smaller. Such collages I always make by selection. This one is smaller. I move it closer to the center, and then move to the bottom. I put it here now, and then it will be seen. Now I will explain why I decided to choose the color black. You can move on to the inverted photo. Making it more transparent. The black background makes a nice shadow. Such collages are in demand, so I decided to show how to do it. I can also pull a little purple color from one photo to another. Like this. The main thing is to get a beautiful combination. Instead of black, it could be any other shade, let's say it could be red, or the same purple, but I'm going to choose black in this case because I don't like it to be too mottled. In the next tutorial I will show you how to make the backgrounds more, let's say, mottled, but here I want it to be just the opposite, a kind of minimalism, but very beautiful because, due to the fact that we initially have a photo with the effect of neon, because of the lamp, it is already, in my opinion, very cool looking, so, I will make my brush more transparent. 40. And try to even out the two colors, black and purple, so that the overall work looks aesthetically pleasing. This is actually how collages are created. I hope you can do it. It's very important to understand and memorize the algorithm, and the rest is just a matter of time, I promise. And also, I believe that everything will be great for you. Hey, everybody. So, today we're going to break down how to make a beautiful background, how to make a new background, how to add, for example, smoke or a gradient to our photos. So we're already talking about beautiful effects for photos. So, let's start with the simplest. For example, in order to add spectacular highlights, we can create a transparent layer, take a brush and on the palette to choose any of the neon shades. All neon shades are always in the upper right corner. Let's take, for example, the purple and pink shade. And, for example, we can do things like this, so often do, highlight and highlight photos. Of course, you can make it neater or more transparent. You can change, for example, the mode. They also change the picture in an interesting way. I'll quickly show you here, and you can see for yourself what you like. Of course, we can take a mask. Black brush and remove the color where it is not needed. You can make a little more transparent, for example. Or a little bit brighter on the edges. And this way the most elementary neon in some collage will look beautiful. Neon on a black background looks better. I'll explain now what I'm talking about. For example, I make a transparent layer and just draw a neon strip. This is often used. It's so simple, but it already adds variety to your Instagram. I go back to our girl, delete this layer. That's the easiest thing we can do. Now we're gonna learn something more interesting. We can, for example, Add the background a little bit differently. Choose solid color mask. Choose any color. Let it be a blue shade. Here we can make a black mask and use a white brush on the black mask to apply the color we have chosen. Similarly, here we can choose different blending modes. Now I want to show to further diversify our photos not only with neon flashes. We can add a gradient. Again, the Masks tab. Gradient. We have a gradient right away. By default, it goes from color to transparent. But we can do any gradient we want. There are different gradients already saved in Photoshop. So, for example, I take purple, and I have this beautiful purple and pink background. Okay. But at this point I can double-click on the gradient icon, not the mask but the gradient icon. Here we can change the angle of the gradient. We can change the style. You can also do inversions here, and then the colors will change places. All the other settings I never touch. We can also double-click again on the gradient, and here we can also apply other gradients from other folders. We open a folder, for example. We've selected one, we've selected a second gradient, we've selected any gradient we want. I want us to take this apart on another photo where it will look more interesting. But anyway, you already know that you can absolutely just make your photo brighter. If especially you like to keep your page quite bright and prominent, I'm going to try to add an interesting gradient to this photo so we can play with it and make a finished shot. This is the photo that we processed in the course. I already have a finished collage of it. Let's go into gradient again, choose gradient, and this is where I'm going to figure out what colors I want. So let's start with the leftmost one. I'm going to take the red shade. For the next shade, I'm just going to click on the segment. So I'll add a color. For example, I'll take pink. Next I'll take purple. And I'll add the rest of the shades in order. Normally I don't use so many shades because there are too many. But I want to show you all of them. Right now, it's transparent because we originally chose a gradient from color to transparent. But here we're doing an opacity of 100. And I've changed it all around. It turned out kind of like a rainbow. Let's save our cool gradient. You can change the style of the gradient. I'm going to go with linear, but change the angle a little bit. I'd like it to look like this. I want to show you how versatile gradients can be to make them really interesting. I'm going to go to the liquify filter. If you're prompted to convert the smart layer, you might agree. But that means that at that point our gradient will become a picture. And we can no longer change it in the gradient settings. I'll go along with that because I'm pretty sure. Okay. I take the warp forward tool, for example, and I can stretch the gradient one way. You don't have to do that. I just want to maximize what you can do with your photos. Let's create a black mask, and with white brush and now show the gradient on the photo. Brush opacity 28. I'm painting. It's looking pretty bright right now. We can play with the blending modes, for example. I'm looking at the blending modes. I'm going to like the linear light. It's like normal light, just a little more saturated. I think it looks pretty cool. I'm going to make this layer more transparent. And now I can, for example, stretch our gradient over the photo. It can look different. I take a mask and where I don't like it, I can remove it a little bit. I can remove it completely depending on how I want it to look. I want to leave it a little bit on my photo because I want to add some zest to the photo. I don't want to make it too colorful. I need to show the lips here first of all. Of course, I can use a dense brush. 49, for example. And paint brightly here. I'm just not sure it would look good. So I'm going to make our layer transparent again, take a black brush, and I'm going to try to highlight the lips. I'm going to take a brush opacity of 50 so that a little bit of gradient is left on them and the original color shows up. This way, I can create an image that no one can duplicate. Yes, it's an amateur thing. Yes, it's not for every photo. But sometimes it's a very interesting variety. For example, I can try to copy now this gradient and paste it into another photo. The gradient copied without distortion, so I'll go into liquify again. Made it more transparent. Created a mask and, with a black brush on a white mask, I'm going to remove the gradient from her face and her sweater. Although I'm going to leave a little shadow on the sweater. Like this. And now it looks diverse. On the white background, of course, more noticeable. This is also one of the options. Next, I'd like to break down the option of layering not only color and gradient, but also interesting textures. For example, we can try to do a lip unusual effect. Because I want my students to learn how to make photos stand out and attract attention. For example, on this photo I can add this kind of smoke, it's just smoke, I found it from the internet. I'm trying to stretch the photo of the smoke. I go into the modes. And I'll select the screen. And this is the smoke I got. I can adjust it as I want. I can adjust how it will look and blend with my photo. I can partially remove it with a mask. I can make it more diagonal or more blurry. Or enlarge it. The main thing is to make it clear that it's smoke. I'll try to leave it like this. I'll take a mask, remove the borders of the smoke. Make it look natural. So the only thing I don't like right now is that the smoke is still blue. Of course, we can fix that too. To do that, I open up the mask panel. Hue saturation. Right now the mask is attached to the previous layer with the smoke. We leave it that way because we only need to change the color of the smoke. And I'm going to pick a setting that I like. I can do, for example, very saturated hues. I can also take away the saturation completely and just do a light smoke, which a lot of people want to add to their photos. I'll add a neon color. Why not? Let it be orange. That's what I want to do. I'm going to reposition it a little bit so that the teeth aren't orange. I'm going to mask the orange off the teeth. That's it. Of course, we can make this layer as transparent as we want. And let's move on to our last picture, which is actually beautiful as it is. We could add a little purple here. Choose a color from the palette. I choose the most neon. And, for example, I could draw some stripes here and that would look good. Make it more transparent and that's it. It looks interesting and cool. But we'll try to add something here to add some originality. We'll take some smoke like this. I think it's perfect for this photo. I'm gonna change it up a little bit. I'll position it the way I like it. We'll go back to screen mode. It looks cool, I think. You could make it a little bit more transparent. You can try to stretch it out so the smoke isn't so thick. I'll take a mask, and I'll remove the smoke where I think it's too thick. That's cool. That's how masterpieces are made. I wish you more creativity, more interesting collages, more interesting photos, more interesting effects. In general, I wish you to create like an artist. See you at the next lesson. Hey, everybody. So, today we have the most long-awaited lesson for many people. It will be a lesson on creating cool, differentiating you from others, content. This lesson is already as much as possible about creativity. And thanks to this knowledge, everyone will be able to diversify their feed as much as your imagination allows. So, we have today neons and graphic design for permanent makeup photos. Let's try it. And let's start with the easiest one. For this tutorial, you'll need two tools that maybe we didn't bring in the very beginning in the first tutorial. I'm going to remind you how to do this. We go to the Edit menu at the top. Toolbar. And we need to add two tools. These are the line and curvature pen tools. Then once you've found them, you need to move them from here to here. When you've done that, you have these tools appear in the panel on the left. Let's start with this photo. I've minimized our retouch group, and I'm merging all the layers into a new layer. Next, I'm going to create a new transparent layer on top. We're going to start by creating just regular pretty lines. What do we need for this? First of all, I go to the panel where we have brushes and I choose hard round. But it's usually not completely stiff, it's a little bit softened. Like 70. We'll vary that later. I change the size right away in relation to our eyebrow. What kind of line I'd like? Well, let it be 25, if anything, we can easily change that. The opacity of the brush is 100 and 100. So, I can choose like, a nice color. Let it be, for example, a minty shade like this. Then we can replace them easily, and we take the curvature pen tool. Any of the pen tools can be used to do what we're about to do. But I thought I'd show you the easiest tool. Of course, any of you can go deeper into this later on. If you like doing these things and want to develop your skill. So, I'm going to put the first point a little bit further away from the lower brow line, because I know I'm going to have a narrower line, and it's going to be very thin, or maybe it's not going to be there at all. And I'm going to insert the dots under our eyebrow in small segments, about equally. Then when I have a line drawn, I right-click on the line. The pen should always be on for this. You can draw this line, go back into the brush, adjust the brush, but you need to go back into the pen to continue to adjust our line. I press stroke patch. Here selects the brush instrument. Simulate pressure. Press enter. That's the line we got. If I see that it's too thick for me, I cancel my last action. If I see that one piece of my line is missing, I finish it again. I go to the brush settings and make it a little bit smaller. 18, for example. And I'm going to turn the stiffness down to 44. Let's try it. Again, stroke patch. This window is always the same. I right-click to delete the outline. You can also just press enter. I'm just used to doing it this way. This is a beautiful line we have. We can also change its color, change its settings. We can change the color in this way. We click on the layer on which we did it. It always has to be transparent. Right-click. Blending options. Looking for the color overlay option, I go here. I click on the color icon and I can change it to whatever color I want. You can see here that I'm changing the hue. Let's do it again, but only on the lips, for example. So, I'm combining all the layers, making a transparent layer. Let's choose a color. As you already know, we can do it now, or we can do it later. For example, I want to make a stroke over the lip. I do it in small sections so that the line has a neat curve. And that's what I'm talking about, my line is off to the side. But I can fix that. I click where I want to change it. I have a point that I change. This is the point that I want to bring a little bit closer to the center. And now this spot a little bit too. I continue with my movements. Carefully, without rushing. Basically, it's not a difficult process. If I see that I've lowered the line too much, I can move it a little bit closer to the lip. I like it that way. So, when I've drawn my line, I press stroke patch again. Brush. OK. Press enter. And I can see that it's a little bit uneven here. So I'm going back in to fix it. Now, I'd like to make my brush more transparent, so I'm going to set the opacity to, like, 72. And let's try a stroke patch. Brush. OK. This is how you get a more transparent line already. I can see that the line isn't perfect here. And we'll get through this easily. I can add a few more dots to fix what I've done. After all, one always wants to see one's work perfect, and it's up to us to make it beautiful. Leveled. I can try to make my brush even less stiff. To do that, I clicked on stroke patch. OK. Enter. That's the line. It's already softer. I can make it more transparent. If I still don't like a certain point, I can go back and do something else, like here. Sometimes you have to do the same action several times to get it perfect. With lips it's always more difficult. Let's try another brush. Here we have a nice softer round brush right next to it. I've set the hardness to 0. Let's also leave the opacity at 72. I'm going back to the curvature pen. Stroke patch. OK. Enter. The line is much softer now. I like it better this way. Now I'd like to make a cool collage here. So I'm creating a new layer. Merged all the layers. Fully selected our photo. Copied it. Cancelled the selection. Crop the photo to fit the Instagram post. Paste the photo and I look for the best position for it. At the bottom I want to add another photo of the same lips, but I want to add it without the stripe. I hide all the previous layers starting with the stripe. And here I have a layer with a retouched photo with no effect. I click on this layer. I select the whole photo again. Copy it. I cancel the selection. I turn on all my layers. And on the last layer, I insert the photo. I reflect this photo horizontally. I find the perfect position. I create a mask. The brush is black. I'll change the brush to a regular soft, round brush. I draw it so that it's a nice collage. Now, when I've done that, I can go back to this layer here where I drew the purple line. I copied it. And I paste it on top of all the layers. I'm mirroring our stripe horizontally exactly the same way and pasting it to these lips that I have at the bottom. Now I can change the color of this strip. Overlay options, color overlay. I'll choose pink. That's the beauty of it. This is a light version of our new knowledge. It's gonna get better. Let's continue with this photo. Now I'd like to show you how to make this line more interesting. The first thing we can do with it, for a change, is, for example, add a gradient. It's almost like we did in the last tutorial, but now we do it in the settings of this layer. We go into the layer overlay options again. And here we have a gradient overlay. I'm turning off the color overlay. I turn on the gradient overlay. And there we see that we have a gradient. In the same way, we can choose absolutely any colors, create a gradient on our own. That's all we've done in previous lessons. You all know this already. I'm going to come back here again and I'm going to remove the gradient overlays as well. Because I want to show you how to apply a nice texture, like a shiny texture. So, I just took some pictures off the internet. Here, for example, is the kind of glitter that I have, red and gold glitter. I just take the red glitter and add it to my picture. Move it to the area where I have the line. And now in order to add these sequins to the line, I just press the Option or Alt key. I'm between the two layers with the sequins and the line. And just like we did with the texture in the frequency separation process. We saw this arrow, we just press it. So we've joined the top layer to the bottom layer. And we've got this nice shiny line. And we can go to the layer with the glitter, Command or Control+T, and we can adjust the position of the picture. I can zoom in and out. Here we can, for example, delete this layer and try to add gold sequins in the same way. Exactly the same way. Chose the positioning and attached this layer to the layer with the line. And it's such a beautiful line. So, it's about the beautiful and the simple. The beauty is in the little things. Now we're going to learn neon lines. So, I'm going to go into the overlay settings again. I'm going into the color overlay again. So, going into the color palette. Let's have, for example, a bright green color. I'm going to take a softer shade, for example, something between bright green and white. Same thing with any color, if we're doing neon, we're going to go between white and neon. Now I'm going to press Outer Glow. And I go into the palette, and I choose our bright green color. Okay, I zoom in on the photo to see. And we can make the size bigger. The spread smaller. More transparent or less transparent. As with anything, we can play with the settings. There's no limit to our desires and imaginations. And I'd like to break down the neon technique now in more detail on the more interesting photo. We will soon draw a hair pattern on the eyebrow. In general, this is how simple neon lines are actually made. I can, for example, change the shade to bright pink. I can also change the color overlay. For example, here I've gone to a pink and made it a soft pink. Now we're going to break this down already in more detail, in the next picture. So, we create a new layer on top of the group as usual, but I'm doing this because it will be easier for me to show. I'm going to create a transparent layer and I'm going to take the curve pen tool. And now I want to draw little hairs and I'm going to show you just how to do it. It's pretty simple. Just like we've already done one stripe, we're going to do a lot of stripes. 1, 2, 3. And I've got a curved line. So, in order to move on to the next line, in order to draw a whole pattern and not have to do a color overlay on each stripe, I press one more extra point. I press the backspace key. And so it's removed and the pen is cleaned up. And I can start drawing the next hair. Just put a dot in a new place. I try to make the pattern match the hairs. 3 dots. An extra step. Backspace. And go on. So, when I've already drawn the whole pattern, I key press and Shift and Command or Control. And click my mouse over each stripe. I hate doing that. Because you can't see them very well. They're very thin. When I'm done selecting, I go into the brush settings. Again selecting the brush I used to make the lines before. I think it's about a size 25. Let's pick a color, for example. Let's make it a subtle yellow. Go back to the pen. Click on Select a Stroke Path. Brush. This is the beauty we have. This is how light they are now. I'm going into our layer overlay options, select Outer Glow. Choose Yellow Neon. And here too, by the way, you can choose the blending mode. I always have it set to normal. These are the cool neon lines we get. I love this effect a lot. I can take an eraser, wipe that stain off. I don't know where it came from. That's the picture. My customers love it. You can also do the next layer to do it in a different color, like even thinner stripes. So it's up to your imagination. And we will move on to our next interesting activity. And on this picture I would like to make a scheme with arrows, as also like very many of my customers. As usual, I create a layer that combines all layers, create a new transparent layer. So, in order to create beautiful arrows, we need the line tool, which we added today at the beginning of the lesson. Go into lines. And this is where you can choose. I usually work in shape or pixel mode. I'm going to show you shape. Here I can choose a hue. Then I can change it, like in the previous examples. For example, let's choose green. I like it, it's beautiful. Next, I usually never apply this. Here I have a new layer set up. I'm going to show it like this now, and later I'll turn this feature off. And here we can choose the thickness of the arrow. Now I'm going to show you what I need to do to make an arrow. Click on the shape and patch settings. Here we can also choose the outline. And here we have arrows. Then when I don't have a choice anywhere, I draw regular lines. To customize the arrow, we can choose where we want the angle of the arrow to be at the beginning, at the end. Or we can make an arrow with two ends. And, of course, we choose the width and length of our arrow to make it look nice. I have already adjusted the approximate size, but it all depends on what you like and the size of the photo. Here is the width and length. So we're going to start with an arrow that's only going to go one way. I've chosen to go to the beginning. And we're going to start drawing. You can draw the arrows at any angle you like. Now, when I have the top green arrows already drawn there, I want to point out that because we've chosen to overlay on a new layer in the settings, I now have each arrow on its own layer. This is convenient for a beginner to change the location of each arrow. I don't need it and it's inconvenient. Now I press the Command or Control key and select absolutely all these layers in order to combine them into one. I right-click, and I click just Merge Shapes. And now I've got that as one layer. And now I'm going to create a new layer. I go into the Line tool again. I've selected Pixels. Remove the Add to New Layer. And I choose double-sided arrows. Here we go. That's how easy and fast such a nice interesting scheme is ready. So, for what I made, for example, yellow and green on different layers, in order to, for example, now to decorate or diversify our lines. Let's click on the layer with the green arrows. Overlay options. We can change the color. Let it be, for example, some light purple here. And let's do an outer glow. Let's choose a bright purple color. I don't really like it because I want the color to be brighter. So I'm going to change it to pink. And the glow on the color. That's how I like it better. Let's go to the second layer. And adjust whatever color you like. I'm going to do this layer in orange. Okay. That's a pretty cool scheme we got here. Let's, try to add some more neon lines in here. Let's create a new transparent layer. Take a curvature pen. And make neat strokes on the lines under the eyebrow and above the eyebrow. And choose the color of our brush that I'd like to use here. Let's make it, for example, some red. I'm checking if I have the right brush. Yes, it's correct. Shift and Command or Control and select both lines. Stroke path. OK. Enter. And that's the beauty we have here. Let's add a red neon glow. I can play with the settings a little more. Each of us can apply different new beautiful colors here, each of us can experiment in his own way. I really like all these techniques. I know how much this graphic design helps all my students and my customers that I take these photos to stand out. So I'm very happy that I was able to teach you. This is our last class.